Dark, Cosmo, Jesse, how you guys doing?
Doing good, brother. How you doing this morning?
Well, I didn't have the fancy music that you normally play, and Lauren's not here with his little play school music machine, so I think Space is defaulted to some little jazz, little lounge music.
Yeah, it kinda put me to sleep there. I'm getting all sleepy.
Why don't you sing for us, Cosmo, to get the energy back up?
I don't know, from yesterday, I don't think that that's a very good idea. We tried that. Didn't land too well.
How's it going, Jesse? I think you missed yesterday or last couple of days. I'm not sure how long you've been gone.
What's up, brother? No, yeah, I missed yesterday. I was bummed. Just doing some work, but glad to be here. Good morning, everybody.
You don't set your work schedule around Bitcoin Today
Yeah,
spaces. I mean, everyone sets it
I
around
actually,
this.
I actually do. I have it blocked off actually on every morning. So, but sometimes people want to schedule during that time. But I literally have it blocked, so I try to avoid meetings.
And Cosmo, you're hosting the next 2 days, right? Because I don't know where Lauren is this week. Do you know where he went?
Lauren's in an undisclosed location. He's just out in the wilderness somewhere, with his family, I believe. So, he's been gone this week. So, yeah, I'll just be in the host spot tomorrow and Friday, and I think, Puncher's got, somebody coming on Friday that should be super fun, and, tomorrow's just a chat, so, yeah, it'll be good.
Hey, Dark, how did your spaces go yesterday after we ended? I think you were still running some more of your own, weren't you?
No, no, I just stayed on Bitcoin today for a while. It was a good space. Yeah, went well.
So, curious what you guys think. I'm hearing both sides and sort of opposite sides of the spectrum on the stable coins, like how great they can be, how good they can be for the dollar, how good they can be for people as a on ramp into Bitcoin. But then I'm also hearing lots of people say, well, it's just another shitcoin and it's just a CBDC in disguise. And I can see both sides of that. But I was just curious what your thoughts were, if you guys have given it much thought or looked into the terms of the Genius Act.
All I know is that I should have, bought a bunch of Circle on their IPO because they're up, what, like 400% now? Did you see that?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And I think XRP has been trending because of that. For some reason, they think that they're going to get acquired by Circle or be a part of that. I don't know.
Yeah, there's rumors that, Garlinghouse is dumping on his holders, the XRP holders, to get enough to buy Circle, but I from what I've heard, that's not gonna happen.
Yeah, I think both Hoskinson and Gargleballs realize that if they just sell their own tokens to buy Bitcoin or anything else, they'll do better.
Hmm. Yeah. The whole Genius Act is curious in as much as they outlawed stable coins paying yield to the holders. So that creates a monopoly slash technocracy where the companies that issue stable coins get to keep all the yield, and stable coins are essentially cash. They pay no interest. So think of holding stable coins as holding cash. I think what's dangerous about stablecoins is that they are designed to get into the hands of the entire world, right? So to create dollar dominance throughout the entire planet, right? Have third world nations, have nations in the global south and Asia using stablecoins, and when I say stablecoins, those are US dollars. So where that becomes dangerous is that you begin to inflate away all of the other currencies, because as dollar dominance increases, those currencies will fall under extreme pressure. So that can create tremendous instability throughout the world. Um, I guess that's good for the US, but it can be bad for the US at the same time. The other thing I'd point out is that as you begin to destroy global currencies, you put yourself into a position where you're the last one to be destroyed. That's true, but eventually you get destroyed and you inflate away the US dollar. So I think in the short term, from a US perspective, they're a good thing. From a global perspective, they're horrible. But in the long term, they'll be horrible for everybody.
Yeah,
Well,
because it's
yeah. I was
oh,
just
go
gonna,
ahead,
yeah, I was
Cosmo.
just gonna say, I think I tried to like, because there's a lot of like moral repugnance that goes along with the US dollar, but you know, if you kind of look at some of the situations a lot of these people are in who are in currencies that are far worse than the dollar, right? The currency you want to be in is the dollar. And I think to some extent it's good globally because there's this really really easy opportunity for some of these people who live in the global south or in countries where they're continuously being debased, an opportunity with the knowledge they have now, right, to get out of their local currency and into the dollar. So I mean it's good for them on that front. It's kind of going up the ladder, right, of currencies where they're kind of stuck at the bottom of the ladder, and going up a rung is good, right, from their currency to the dollar. Ultimately it would be best if they went all the way to the top of the ladder up to Bitcoin. But I don't know, part of me feels like it might be kind of a good thing for a lot of these people who you're getting their currency devalued by whatever 50% a year, to have the opportunity to at least get out of that system and into one that's a little better. um but yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree. It's, like Dark says, it's the dollar is the tallest munchkin in Oz. I made it a little more kid friendly there, Dark, for you. And so, it's like so many of these countries that they would just kill to have the dollar, right? Compared to their inflation rate, their level of debasement. Them looking at the dollar is kind of like how we look at Bitcoin. So, yeah, in theory, in a perfect world without capital controls or authoritarian regimes, they should be able to just go straight to Bitcoin. But some of them still can't. They're still having trouble. So just to be able to get into the dollar for them would be
And it's the
great.
information asymmetry, right? Like 90,
Yeah.
99, 100% of the world knows that the dollar's probably better than, I mean, of these people in these countries know the dollar's better. And if they can get access to it, then great. And they don't need that, long education to understand why Bitcoin is better. So they can kind of move up with the information they have now and kind of get to a better place.
Yeah, the stablecoin is really like an extension of the dollar. If you think about what the dollar did when we went off the gold standard, it was basically like, look, here's a coupon, here's an IOU for gold. We're no longer going to be on money. So now you have a valet ticket. Just keep your car parked here. As long as you have that valet ticket, you have the value of your car. Later, when you turn it in, you get your car back. Well, once we depegged off of that and just, psyoped everybody into thinking the dollars were money, that's that's what we've been, so we've had no money really, we've had a currency. The stablecoin to me just takes it to another step, because now that the stablecoin isn't backed by gold, it's backed by the dollar itself. So it's like it's 2 degrees away. And then now of course it becomes programmable. Can it expire? Can we only use it in a certain zip code? I don't know. When I first came into Bitcoin, I thought stablecoins were amazing because they were offering interest rates at the time, right? Do you guys remember when it was like, oh, 8.6% on USDC, 10% on Tether? It was pretty crazy that the rates were so high. And so, I wasn't a full Bitcoiner. I just saw it as a trade and as a way to save. And I was like, this is incredible. Why would everybody not just be saving in these stable coins? And what that did is it got me one step closer to Bitcoin, because whatever app or platform you were on to get those, you just click a button and you convert it to Bitcoin. So I don't know if that will be available to other people in other countries, but from that standpoint, I would see it as positive if they could use it as a stepping stone, maybe a wobbly stepping stone, but into something better.
Yeah, I'm also curious about the whole the capital controls thing, because I feel like the private stable coins that exist outside of the US, I'm genuinely like less worried about those kinds of things, like, timing out your dollars, or you can only, spend these dollars at specific businesses and things like that. I feel like there's less likely that to happen with these ones that are not domestic, right? Like Tether's down in El Salvador now, and some of these other ones that'll pop up. So I don't know. It feels less like a CBDC to me, but I might just be naive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
these are really good takes. Totally agree with everything you guys are saying. Um, if you look at the buildings around the world in the cities or around in the U.S., most of the tallest buildings are owned by banks. And to me, this is like a preemptive bailout for the banks by the government, because they realize that if they don't have some sort of controls around this, people will realize eventually that they don't need a bank. And so, in my mind, the sort of control over the yield is probably just so that the banks can try to stay in business. The banks can offer these stable coins. The banks can come up with their own little yield system, whatever that might be. Um, so that's, yesterday I was talking about stable coins positively, and I think there are some really good aspects to it. Primarily, what you guys are saying, just with adoption and people around the world not being able to get into Bitcoin, and this is probably a little bit of a softer transition for them. But that being said, if you are going to be choosing between Bitcoin and a government controlled and regulated stablecoin, I would choose Bitcoin 100 times out of 100 times. So, I think it's just a necessary, not necessary, but expected transition that the government's going to try to control this stuff. One thing I brought up yesterday that maybe is a question today we could talk about as well is just how we think this is going to play out with the fact that the US is doing this, but you could still have a stable coin. You could still domicile your business somewhere else, even if you're, a person in the US. You could domicile your company, have a stable coin that's not regulated, and try to sell that out into the world. US folks. So, and also keep in mind that a stable coin just means that the coin is pegged to something quote unquote stable, right? In this case, we're talking about coins that are pegged to the US dollar, which we probably would argue is not a stable currency. So that's kind of a misnomer in some sense. But you also might have stable coins that, other countries say, hey, look, we want to have a stable coin, but we're not going to back it off the dollar. We're going to peg it to gold, or we're going to peg it to our own fiat currency or what have you. So those kind of things should be interesting. I'm not sure how it's going to all pan
Yeah, it's
out.
really just nominal stability. Hey,
Yeah.
before we go to you, Alexander, I see Josh up here. We rarely get him up here, so I wanted to say hello to you. Josh Mandel, how's it going?
I'm great. How are you guys doing? Thanks for hosting this, Terence and Dark. Appreciate you guys' work.
Yes, absolutely. And Cosmo, he's not chopped liver. He's up here.
I see Cosmo over there with a laugh emoji. Yeah, I just missed him.
Okay, yeah.
My screen is tiny, so I get guys pushed off the corner. But yeah, and Dark kind of solicited me to come on and maybe give a little chat about some post I made regarding notes versus preferred stock and MSTR. So if you want to chat about that, I'm open to it.
Yeah, absolutely. We're sort of all over the place. We just started off talking about stable coins, but we always can come back. Those are stable. So
Yeah, yeah.
so while we have you, yeah.
Yeah,
Jump
well, Jeff
Hey,
jump in.
Josh.
Jeff Booth
Josh,
always said,
thanks so much for coming up. I just need 10 minutes, and I'll be
no
ready to
problem.
go.
Anything. All right, I'll wait for you. So you guys go ahead with your subject. I'll just say about stable coins. Jeff Booth always says stable coins are guaranteed to lose money versus Bitcoin over time. That's all he always said.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Alex, what's going on? Let's go to you.
Thanks, Terence. Thanks for having me, guys. Yeah, I also just what you said to the stablecoins. I think we use them to when Bitcoin is made too volatile for me, then it's easier, right, to swap into USDT or USDC. Do I see a lot of private USD stablecoins? I mean, at the end, it's just an algorithm, right? And we saw that this stuff can fail, which, as you said, what is the stable amount of it? Probably some people need to feel more comfortable that the portfolio cannot drop 80% and just getting devalued this year 2%, next year probably 4%. If everything fails, we're probably looking at 15% again, and we all freak out. So, but yeah, that's, I think, going forward with stablecoins. And Terence, you will agree. I mean, with fiat, I would say, if you look at it, it's probably a way to understand Bitcoin and the value prop faster. Thanks, guys.
Lev, I don't know if I've ever shared a stage with you, so welcome. How's it going?
We lost him just like that. He didn't want to share a stage with you, Terence.
I think it was you, Cosmo. He saw that you were here as well.
So I chimed in and dipped. But yeah, I think that the stablecoin thing is interesting, and I think that there are a lot of takes on it, and there are a lot of people in the space who don't like that we talk about it that much. And I think for me, the understanding stable coins, I was when I was at the Bitcoin conference, it was the back to back from the CEO of Tether, followed by Saifedean. I feel like listening to those put a lot into perspective. And to Josh Mandel point he was talking about earlier, what Jeff Booth was saying, that it's guaranteed to lose value with over time. And if Tether holds, currently, what is it, 100,000 Bitcoin on their balance sheet, eventually the value of that Bitcoin will just trounce the rest of their holdings, right? All of their treasuries and things like that. And Saifedean's prediction is eventually, it'll depeg from the dollar but upwards,
Yeah,
which is
Cosmos, two things. Sorry to interrupt you again. Yes, when we will see that Bitcoin will get, that's what I definitely believe, more stable in its volatility, but it's still a young child, right? I mean, 16 years, guys. And going forward, the math will be more easy, right? So we will not have this volatility, but that's probably still out 15 years, I would say.
Yeah. When you
So
say
you should,
the
and
name stable,
one more thing to the to
go ahead, Alex. Go ahead.
we probably just adopted because we know by stablecoins we probably can reach a help desk. Okay, that's the only reason.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, the term stable and that's being used is relative to time, right? And really, it's just they're saying, hey, people don't like volatility. They can't handle these big swings like you're talking about, Alex, with Bitcoin. And so, yes, it's stable in the sense that we don't have as much volatility in the value of the dollar. But if you then extend the time horizon 10, 20, 30, 50 years, you're looking at a currency with no backing compared to finite money. And so that's what people don't understand, I think, the average Joe. And that's why stablecoins will get adopted. But if you're a true Bitcoiner, like, you understand the difference between that definition of stable.
All right, while we're waiting for Dark and Josh to get
If I
ready.
can chime in, Terence.
Yes. Oh, please. I didn't know
So,
if you needed to wait for Dark or
no,
not, but you.
I want to talk about
All
stable
right.
for a second.
Yo, if you're good on your own, perfect.
Okay, yeah, stable coins are an interesting subject because we talk about what does it mean stable with respect to, and I think stable and upward bounding is not a bad idea to sort of extend the argument that that one was making just a little about safety was making earlier. So the way I think about it is this: I don't know if people believe in power law here, but to my point of view, I'm just sort of a math geek, and I look at power. I just say the fit is the fit. It's meaningful, but I only look at the base. This is what they call the bottom price, because the bottom price has never been violated, and that's sort of the meaningful thing to me. That's the whole end all and be all of power law. So the bottom price is a very significant haircut from the current price of the market right now, probably $20,000 or more, but it is the price that is inviolable, in my opinion. And so, if you were to sort of create a new, like if you could go back in time, not the anyway time travelers, but if you could go back in time to Luna and like try to whisper into Do Kwon's ear and say, you better hurry up and forget about just the pure algorithmic side of things and start backing this thing with Bitcoin using the power law and the bottom price would be your haircut. In other words, you would say to them, all right, whatever the price is of, let's say $40,000 is the price for the bottom price, that is the LTV that you're going to use to back your stable coin. And in that way, you're going to basically suck up all this Bitcoin, put it in a place that's safe in a vault, and have the price of the stablecoin be a floor that is based on and derived from this bottom price. And that is stable. The bottom price is stable. If you look at it, it just goes up over time at the CAGR. And there's this oscilloscope that goes woo, 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 up and down above that bottom price and can take us up to 2 or 3 times the standard deviation. But if you really just wanted to conservatively say, like a bank using fractional reserve banking, we're going to evaluate Bitcoin at its bottom price for the purposes of establishing a floor to the stablecoin, you would end up having a situation where safety and prediction could come true, where eventually it would float up to the point where it couldn't even get to the floor anymore. That the price of a stable coin called whatever it would be called an earth buck would be worth $2 eventually. So that's my thing, is that there has to be a way to take Bitcoin and use it as a store of value to back the stable coin with an extremely low LTV. That's all I have to say.
Earth bucks. I like that. Earth political currencies.
Yeah, it's a great point, Josh. It's like nobody just like look at the graph. It's going up, right? And it's like people don't pay attention to the bottom. They just look at the volatility on the short term, which always pisses me off. But that's a really good way to look at it.
AC, how's it going? What's on your mind this morning?
Hey, what's going on, guys? I just threw something in the pill and I'll share it to the nest here in a second. But this is one of the things that really struck me with stablecoins. Obviously, we're all Bitcoiners and that's our primary focus. But with all the geopolitical tension around the world, I read an article by OGBTC Marshall Long, and he kind of talked about his struggles of getting money into Iran, and it definitely demonstrates the use cases of stable coins in specific situations. And for me, I think it's important to understand the different potential use cases. And I appreciate Alex Gladstein's comment there with Aqua, which would have alleviated quite a few of the headaches that he had in moving money. And then my first thought reading it was, why not just use Lightning? Lightning makes way more sense. But as I'm going through the comments, I guess there's a broker involved in trying to convert to cash that wouldn't accept Lightning, and that's why they were kind of tied to USDT. So not that I'm an advocate for stablecoins, but just understanding the landscape of tools available for folks to be able to utilize their Bitcoin in specific situations. That's all I wanted to share.
Well, and I think, and I'm not very technical, but I understand that Tether is working on sending USDT over the Lightning Network now too. So there's this huge ecosystem being built out to kind of move around some of that stuff. And to your point, like I feel like in the West, we don't really understand how valuable that is, except for on some occasions. I was trying to make a bank transfer the other day and I was on hold for like 2 hours and spent so much time trying to figure out how to do all this anyway.
But Cosmos, sorry to interrupt you, because you say that, right? Tether moves now over Lightning and uses kind of the Bitcoin rail Lightning. I think I have the Aqua wallet. I want to check this out, but based to the MiCA regulations, actually they switched over to USDC, right? Again, I was not a big stablecoin holder, even with all this Luna debacle and all that stuff, because I understand, okay, why should I hold a currency which you guys can devalue? And I don't know how much you will devalue it. And we will always find reasons why we have to do it. But anyways, so coming back to the MiCA, there's still, I think, will we also use USDC on Lightning? Yeah, that's all.
I'll just pose a question while we're talking about the stables, and I know Dark and Josh, you guys are gonna go off into a different topic, but just back to the CBDC thing real quick. Like, the Genius Act happened, and I think there's a lot of excitement just because things are getting more codified and there's more of a framework and a structure, and we can see the governments are capitulating and they have to figure out a way to play. But I mean, it's pretty much just a CBDC, right? Like Terrence, you were saying it earlier, like we don't. I looked through all the docs, and it doesn't look like too horrible, but can't they just do whatever they want pretty much at this point and say, hey, you can only use it here or there, it's going to expire, what have you? Like, what are your thoughts on that? It feels like a CBDC to me.
You're
Pretty
talking about
much.
Circle specifically?
Not necessarily just the Genius Act, but yeah, you could say it in the framework of
Yeah, well,
Circle
I mean,
too.
to an extent, I think, and this is what I was talking about earlier. I think that if you're looking at domestic stablecoin issuers, like I know JP Morgan yesterday came out and they're like, yeah, we want to do one, right? And they're offering, Bitcoin to their clients as well. I think that the domestic ones, there will be a lot more influence from the government on those. But if you go offshore, to like Tether and some of these other ones that will be servicing most of the rest of the world, I mean, they could do something like that. And maybe I'm naive and the government could strong arm them and say, hey, we're not going to sell you treasuries unless you like abide by these specific. But I think the United States is desperate enough to sell treasuries, for now in the next 5, 10 years, that their stipulations won't be very high, right? So if Tether's like, hey, we're not going to track anything, we're going to send it over the Lightning Network, so you have an incredible amount of privacy. We're not going to have tokens expire, all this kind of stuff. Then really the CBDCs will be the ones that are closely connected to the government and under their jurisdiction, like Tether, or, of course, if like JP Morgan wants to issue one, they're going to be, hand in hand with the government and things like that. So I don't know. I was more worried about the CBDC thing a couple years ago, but this seems like it's, and I my guess is you could probably use the foreign ones domestically too. Like you can still use Tether around here, and
Right.
unless they are like, hey, you can only use Circle in the United States, then you'd have some issues. But we got Lynn's hand up. Should we go to Lynn?
Lynn, hello.
Hey, hello. Thanks for having me up. I just thought I'd toss in a little bit of a different perspective coming from where I am, which is Mexico City. I started on Wall Street, so I understand the financial markets. But I mean, after spending 20 years in the kind of LATAM community, I mean, I look at stablecoins really as digital dollars, and I think that's a more accurate name for them. Digital dollars, I think the original use case at Tether really, originated was to facilitate trade in other regions outside of the United States in a more easy way, and also to protect currencies from devaluation in regions where they have devaluing currencies, and also to open up banking to or the ability to transact for people who could not get bank accounts, which is much more common in LATAM regions and other regions in the world than it is in the United States. And so, that was the original use case. I mean, actually, the original use case of Tether was just to facilitate crypto exchanges, going from one currency to another. And it started on the Bitcoin blockchain and then moved to faster chains. But then as COVID hit, if you listen to the presentation that Paolo gave at Bitcoin 25, he talks about the use case really hit into high gear during the COVID years when it kind of was found as a way of just facilitating trade without having to go through the banking system. So it had this enormous profitability. And I think what's happened is the US banks and Circle probably identified this pretty early and wanted to replicate the model. And now everybody else is like, look at the profits that Tether's making. How can we get a piece of that? And so I think the use case of stable coins is going to be very different in the US than it is globally. I think Tether will probably still retain just because it has such a foothold in all these other countries and it has extreme loyalty. People really like Tether. They like the fact that it's given them this ability to trade in dollars and store dollars because dollars are the preferred currency in most of the world. But I think inside of the US, people kind of I mean, they've had money market funds for a long time that allow trading, and interest bearing. They just haven't been in the news because we've had zero interest rates for so many years. But, money market funds, stable coins, kind of similar products. But I think that I see loyalty use of stable coins in some of the applications in the US market. But I think the global use of stable coins, or what I prefer to call digital dollars, is going to remain just the most important use case of it. But just a little different perspective coming from outside of the U.S. financial system.
No, that's a great take, Lynn. Thank you. Always love it when you join us. Let's say hello to British, and then we'll go to you, Small Petro, while we wait for Dark.
Evening, guys.
So when you're on a talk show, British, you don't just you don't be monosyllabic. If you're just monosyllabic, it doesn't go anywhere. You have to like
Hey,
answer
Terence,
in
how's
the
it going? You guys
Hi.
good? Everyone doing well? Terence,
Oh,
hope you're well. What's
10
up,
times
Josh? What's
better.
up, Cosmonaut? What's up,
What?
Lynn?
Yeah. What's
Hope everyone's doing really well.
Hey, British. What's
I'll be a dancing monkey, Terence. Don't worry, I got you. I apologize.
all good? All good. Hey, so we've been going around the horn on our takes on stable coins, but we also don't have to talk about stable coins if you have something else on your mind. Just
No,
curious.
I think stable coins are are going to be very, very important and essential. I think we are seeing the collapse of 190 central banks into one taking place here. And I think this sort of is going to guarantee US dominance into the foreseeable future. So, whether you believe that's a good thing or a bad thing, it's totally up to you. But certainly the US dollar is pretty safe.
Yeah, that's a good take in terms of consolidation of the bank system. I didn't think about it that way, where the dollar dominance is going to take hold, and through the banking system as well.
Well, the interesting thing about that too is that, Lynn's take on the digital dollar was interesting. I do kind of want to like delineate between calling it a digital dollar and a stable coin, because the jurisdiction of the United States over Tether is significantly less than over, the local banks in the United States. Like they can implement regulations around things like that in the United States, but all Tether is buying a bunch of treasuries and then issuing an asset that's built around these treasuries that's algorithmically, inclined to stay at $1. So it can't have the same programmability in terms of control that that would be normally issued through the classical banking system here and controlled by the Federal Reserve, right? I feel like it's almost like it's a complete separate entity from the Federal Reserve. They really don't have any connection. They just have a connection to the Treasury, right, through the Treasury bills. So I don't know. I think that's interesting. So like consolidation of central banks is also an interesting thought too, because it's like, you know, it kind of all goes back to the Treasury and not really any central banks like the Federal Reserve or, the Bank of Japan or anything like that. Does
So
that kind of make sense
no,
that?
I want to take a completely opposite view of this because I don't think it's that. What I see is what Hal Finney was talking about happening, which is the rebirth of the private banking system, and you're going to have
Right. Yeah,
much.
that's exactly what I'm going for here
Yeah, so like
in like a roundabout way. Yeah.
you're talking about at the beginning of the states, the United States, right? You had private banking that issued currency, and the currency were these IOU notes, right? So when you're talking about the ability for banks to issue currency, I think that's exactly what we're seeing, and it I made the argument earlier on an article that they need this in order to be able to, number one, create an artificial demand for the bonds, right, that they're trying to sell, and number two, I think the other part of it is that they realized that they were not going to be able to keep the avalanche of long bond selling that was bound to come to a close uh, in the Japanese and foreign markets, right? As we begin to transition out of a dollar hegemony system, and you go into a system where it's more multipolar, then you have this just natural drive to get rid of dollars, or at least to rebalance your portfolio, right? Like let's just talk portfolio theory, and you say, hey, I have too much. When Meta, for example, is operating in Europe, they have an active rebalancing of their cash holdings, and their cash holdings happen to be in many different currencies, and so they're doing that. So is every other major corporation that's doing that. So is every country, right? That's doing business. And so if you have that situation where countries are rebalancing their portfolios of dollars, it makes perfect sense that they're going to start ditching dollars. They don't do it in the way of dollars, right? They do it in the way of bonds. And so if they're ditching the long bond, then the price of the bond collapses, but the yield goes through the roof. I think that this administration was very clear on that. They were very clear on what that was going to do to the market, the stock market. And so if you have that combined, then they say, hey, look, this is a perfect opportunity to capture the long bond and to capture that higher yield and keep it inside of the United States. And we can revoke your privilege of having this extra yield at the end of your issuance of more digital dollars that get to float around in a censorship resistant fashion compared to the SWIFT system. And that becomes a really compelling case for them to weaken the dollar significantly whilst strengthening the crap out of the dollar system. Because effectively what they do is they're creating a direct competitor to not only every bank in the world, but every central bank in the world, because the real competition happens at the individual person's wallet. And so now, and this is something that I kind of get irked about with Maxis, which is if you do not understand the importance of a private key pair being your savings vehicle, not necessarily Bitcoin, then you don't get the point, because the thing is this censorship resistant tool. And whether you're sitting in dollars or whether you're sitting in Bitcoin matters less, because the system was originally built to be like all of the alts were originally built to be derivatives of Bitcoin, and their primary use case for Bitcoin, if everybody remembers, was to trade shitcoins. I mean, like that's what we all did. That's what got most people in here. So if that's what you got, that everybody came in here to trade up, then it should be pretty apparent to everybody that every single stable coin is like automatically locked into being interoperable with Bitcoin. So what's the problem with people going into Bitcoin first and having this massive Trojan horse, which is, yeah, get your ass out of the banking system, be self-sovereign as to your dollars. And then once you've gotten through the point where, you've got enough dollars and in those parts of the world, you really, the global South particularly, cannot withstand the swings of Bitcoin, but they can withstand the value of a dollar, because relative to their money, it's super stable. So I think, look,
Yeah.
that's the Trojan horse.
And I think Tether does that is essentially doing that themselves in kind of a roundabout way by holding a large amount of Bitcoin on their balance sheet, like over a long enough period of time. Like, that's the eventual outcome. Let's go to Dark. He's got his hand up.
I would just add to this equation, because there's talk of CBDCs, that I would make the argument that the dollar as we know it is a CBDC, right? Go try to wire $100,000 somewhere, see how that goes. See if you get, like I did, about 40 questions and 3 phone calls and, probably 8 hours of my time
Yeah,
just
that
to get
was
a
my
wire
whole day
through.
yesterday.
It feels like
It's a
getting money out of
CBC.
Coinbase.
Yeah, it's really hard, right? Now, the thing about stable coins, unlike the dollar, which is a guilty till proven innocent system, as you found out, right? The stable coins are an innocent till proven guilty system, right? I can send them anywhere I want. There's instant settlement. And then, yeah, they can come back later, I guess, and halt the transaction, but at least I'm innocent until proven guilty, right? And I think that from that perspective, stable coins offer a real solution.
Dark, you were in the bathroom a long time, but we've had some good conversation.
No, I've been listening. We just had a delivery coming. I had to help out.
Oh yeah, no worries. Hey, Lynn.
Yeah, I
Lynn, you
just
have to.
want to,
Oh, there you
yeah,
go.
I just want to comment on what Dark was saying, and that's exactly the point. Is I think the global South has just determined that stablecoins are a much more efficient way to transfer cash, and I think the U.S. banking system still is really behind with the wire transfers and everything. I mean, in Mexico we have something called SPAY, which allows 24/7 payments, bank to bank, anytime you want. M-Pesas and um, Kenya and PIC system in Brazil. They're all super efficient ways of transferring money that we don't have in the United States. I mean, I guess there's one system that does allow that. But anyway, stable coins have been used by people who either don't have banking relationships in the case of the underbanked, or large corporations to be able to transfer money quickly country to country and kind of get outside of some of these regulatory capture or the delay in payments. So working through the tether system, you can make large transfers and have immediate settlement that you can't have in the traditional banking system. So I think the stablecoin really improves the movement of money globally, and that's kind of the killer application for it, and that's what's been the use case so far. And the fact that it's just based on the U.S. dollar system to, can't remember who was saying that, but it does. British was saying this, that it does extend the dollar hegemony and and the dominance in the global currency, but it just provides a much more efficient way of moving the dollars versus
Lynn,
the
that's
existing
that's me,
banking
Bid
system.
Petro. And also I want to jump on what you're saying, because one of the biggest things that I think is being missed here is what Machankura is doing. Machankura is now providing services to 9 different African countries with SMS, and they are able to do Lightning Bitcoin transactions, as well as, I believe, they're interoperable with M-Pesa. I think that's really the super Trojan horse, because the majority of the world does not have data on their phone. They might have data at home, they might have some fog, but they don't have cloud. They don't operate necessarily like we do here. And so in those cases, I think that's where we go from. That's where I think Bitcoiners have a real big opportunity of really refining the text based Lightning system to be super easy to use. And in that case, you would get this ability to do banking for the unbanked all the way down to the lowest common denominator, which is SMS. Now, the problem with SMS is it's very insecure, and it requires some pretty large trade-offs as far as the wallets and whatnot.
And since someone mentioned Coinbase, I encourage everybody to go ahead and just buy a few dollars worth of stable coins. They'll let you move them off instantaneously. Move them into your wallet, play around with them, right? If you've never played with the stable coin before, buy some USDC, some Tether, transfer it to yourself in a different wallet. It's really eye-opening, and it's an awakening experience.
Jesse, and then back to Lynn.
Yeah, I'll just play off what you just said, Dark, and then I have another point to make. But I've been using stables for the better half of 10 years at this point, and I mean that's how I've done business. I've done business in stables for many years. I don't hold anything. I hold as little as possible in fiat. If you look at my my bank account, it looks like I have nothing, and I just, because I'm
Just
holding.
put it up in the nest, your bank account.
Sure. And so, yes, it's better money, right? It's digital money, as I think Lynn was saying, and it's just the next version that's better than your analog dollars. That being said, there's these control mechanisms, and what I like to do is I look at things from a macro long-term perspective, and I think Bit Petro, you were saying this really well. I think Lynn also, you were pointing this out, but and Dark, I think everyone's sort of been saying this, but extending dollar dominance while still to weaken the dollar. And this is just, I think it's a really interesting play by the US. If you think about what they're doing, they're saying, okay, we see the writing on the wall. We realize that Bitcoin is the foundational unit of measure, the base layer. We're going to have a strategic Bitcoin reserve. We're not going to put gold in our, I mean, we're going to have our other assets, but we're going to start putting, Bitcoin into our coffers. That's going to be the reserve. And then back to Saifedean's presentation, if people saw that presentation about Tether, and what he projects is that he thinks, hey, like Tether is going to continue to build their Bitcoin coffers and hold that on their balance sheet. And eventually, what's going to happen, I don't know if this is 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, or when it's going to happen, but eventually they're going to switch so that the stablecoin is no longer backed by the dollar, it's backed by Bitcoin. So it's just an on-ramp. Like, this whole thing is just a bridge. It's just an on-ramp, and it's a very aggressive, in my opinion, aggressive play by the US to say we're going to continue to establish dollar dominance while we're making this transition.
Back to you, Lynn. And then I know we have Josh here, Dark, who you brought up, so we can start to pivot if you'd like.
Yeah, but Petra, thanks for those observations too, especially Machinkaro, which I think is just a fascinating company. And you're right. I mean, what I see is stablecoins are laying the foundation for just the technology of Bitcoin being able to use to make the banking or global financial system so much more efficient. Like inside of Mexico, there's a company called Sati that is actually out of the Boost Accelerator, but they are moving funds on the Bitcoin platform via WhatsApp. So where a lot of people don't have SMS or I mean, the whole global South uses WhatsApp as their primary communication, good or bad. And so it just is a way of transferring money using it just like a payment platform. And inside of Mexico, there's, well, actually globally now, there's a company called Swapido, which is allowing people who are living on the Bitcoin standard to just link into any bank account. And something similar on the African continent is Tendo, which is funded by the HRF, and they're kind of enabling the.
Lynn, did you get a phone call?
I think we lost her.
There's some. I did, yeah, I did. So,
Yeah, tell them not to
and I'm
call during Bitcoin Today, please.
I know,
Okay.
I know. I'm going to have to jump in a second. But I mean, what I think the bottom line for me is that Bitcoin is such a great asset, but it's also technology. And the technology that it's, the protocol that's enabling all this innovation in the banking system. I mean, no wonder the US banks are finally just like, caving in and just desperate to get involved in some of the profitability the stable coins are, bringing to market, because they're about to lose all their fee revenue that they've been collecting over the years. So I'm going to jump down for a minute. I'll come back later, but I got to bounce. Thanks so much for the great conversation.
Awesome. Thanks, Lynn. All right, Dark. So now that you're back from the restroom and Josh is here, why don't you take it away? I'm not sure what your plan was, but
Yeah, no, Josh put out a fantastic post this morning talking about preferreds versus converts. It's a subject I've been touching on for quite a while, and I was excited to see him post because I really do think he's onto sort of a key point, and I think Sailor's onto the point as well, as we haven't seen any converts in quite some time. Josh, you want to lay out what you're thinking?
Yeah, well, I mean, I just know the convertible bond market. It's a niche market. See, there's fixed income, right? And this sort of classic 60-40 portfolio. There's fixed income, there's equity. That is what comprises the great majority, 90% of the balance sheet of any corporation. There's this little niche market called convertible bonds and even preferred stocks. They really have a very small place. Preferred stocks tend to be for like a situation where somebody's coming in to kind of help rescue the corporation or fund a large single project of the corporation. So Warren Buffett, for instance, bought a multi-billion-dollar preferred stock issuance at Salomon Brothers when we hit our scandal in the early 90s, the Treasury auction scandal, which almost closed down the firm. But he saved the firm with his preferred, and he earned a nice fat dividend as a result. And he got preferred. And what he was demanding was preferred status in the case of a bankruptcy. So in the case that we sort of really effed up, and the partners just, well, we were now managing partners, which were different, but the partners screwed up everything, and the company went bust. The stockholders would lose all their money. And the preferred stock would still get paid to some extent. So that's the purpose of the preferred market, is to give somebody a chance with a priority in the cash flow structure to come in and fund a specific project in a very lumpy way, so they don't have to go through this whole process of trying to place this bond with hundreds or thousands of different buyers. One big buyer is what it usually is. So the convertible bond market is just a little bit different. It's a market that really, it's basically a convertible arb market. In other words, 90% of the bonds that are bought, convertible bonds that are bought, in my opinion, come down to being in the hands of a hedge fund or an convertible arb desk. And the convertible arb desks at Salomon Brothers, for instance, was different than the government desk or the corporate bond desk or any of the equity desks. They were not trading on behalf of customers or they were taking purely proprietary risk. They were basically little mini hedge funds, and their whole business was to try to make money off buying bonds really cheap. So they weren't providing liquidity. And I'll guarantee right now that Saylor is like pissed off with the convertible arb desk. His experiences had to have been brutal, watching them just nickel and dime him left and right. And what they do as a strategy is that they would take their advantage that they know they're about to buy the slug of, let's say, $800 million of convertible bonds, and they're going to have a delta on them. So they're going to go and start selling the stock and knock the stock price down and down and down so that the conversion price, which is set upon this window of like 3 to 8 hours, is as low as possible. And then you'll notice like the first few convertible bonds, within 2 weeks or within 2 months at the latest, they were already in the money. That's ridiculous. These are supposed to take 4 years to get in the money. So these bonds were just free giveaways. And I'm sure that he was getting frustrated by that. Now, the difference is the preferred stock buyer now is a guy sitting in Fidelity with a button that says click buy here. I made a joke the other day, like, this is how I bought this convertible bond. I mean, these preferred stocks, I just click buy here. Or this is how I bought Metaplan. I just click buy here. That's all I have to do. And I don't turn around and hedge. I don't turn around and go, well, I've got this call option that struck at $1,000, so I'm going to turn around and start selling stock. Whereas that's what the convertible bond arbitrage always does. So every time he was selling convertible bonds, he was killing the stock without even meaning to, and then killing the volatility because they were sitting there and layering out call options above the market at the conversion price. And now this preferred stock is being placed where it should be to retail customers who don't mind overpaying a little bit because they have religion. That's my spiel.
Yeah, and I would add to that, like, a perfect example of what Josh is talking about is GameStop.
Yep.
Like, GameStop's now issued 2 converts, and in both cases, the stock dropped what, 25, almost 30% on the announcement, right? Because the ARB desks come in, and it's not just hedge funds, right? You have some of the largest options firms, Susquehanna, Jane Street, Goldman, Merrill, coming in and trading this stuff, right? So that's why I've been really staunchly against the issuance of convertible bonds. The other thing they do is they price the convert probably 40, 50 vol points below, at least back when they were selling converts, right? Below where the options are trading. So if you look at the implied volatility of the convert, because the convert, a zero coupon convert, is essentially just a warrant, right? You're buying a warrant. Well, what price do you pay for the warrant? The warrant should trade symbiotic with the options, but they don't. They trade at a substantial discount. So not only are you getting screwed on the fact that the stock price gets driven down, you're also getting screwed on the fact that the pricing sticks.
Yeah, let me highlight that point to what Dark's saying here. I'm an option trader, right? So I'm out there buying, as some of you are, buying options out 6 months or a year, maybe leaps out a year and a half, and I'm paying for them, and they decay over time. In other words, if the market just sits there over time, I lose money. Even if it goes up and rallies a certain amount, I still lose money. I have to have the market go up by more than a certain amount to break even. Whereas what happens is when I buy a convert bond, I give you money for maybe 2 years, for instance, on a convertible note. And I say, well, I'm willing to accept 0% interest. Well, okay, so what am I foregoing? The opportunity cost of capital. At what rate? 5%? Who gives a frick, right? Meanwhile, what happens is I bought this option for literally nothing. Because as long as I believe that Bitcoin is going to back the return of capital, they'll be able to sell ATM stock to return my capital, which I do, as anyone here in this room probably does. Then I basically just bought that option for free. They're going to give me my money back. I'll just forego the interest that I would have earned in a savings account. That's all. So if they're selling options literally free, what does that do to the vol structure? And that's why I stopped buying options on MSTR when they were selling these converts. They were just killing me. So I think that there's a chance that volatility is vitality, that he inadvertently sort of milked that cow dry, to use that little meme, and that we're going to get it back over time.
Yeah, I agree. And then let's just add the final kicker, which is that the convertible note actually has an expiration date, unlike the perpetual preferreds. So there is always that possibility of creating a run price on a certain date.
Yes.
Right. So everything about that convertible note sucks.
Yeah, it makes them an adversary to the firm and to the retail shareholders who are real investors.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I really appreciated your post because I've been up here screaming from the rooftops. He should never issue another convertible note again. And I took a lot of shit for saying that.
No, you're right, Dark, and you're the only one that can get me onto a space. So good job.
Thanks, brother. I really appreciate that. And thank you so much for coming up and sharing your wisdom, man. We really appreciate it.
Anytime, enjoy, folks.
Thanks, Josh.
You're the best, Josh.
By the way, Lauren must be listening anonymously. I mean, I don't see him here, but he just DM'd me and he's like, "What was all that? There was a lots of fancy words there. What's the takeaway?" And I just responded, "Buy Bitcoin." What is that good advice?
Lauren can hit me up directly. He's got my DM.
Okay, yeah, he doesn't know what's going on.
Hey, Terrence, who talks faster, Josh or Matt McDonough?
Oh man. Yeah, they both are a mile a minute. They both are the opposite of Rusty.
If I could turn Josh down to 0.5 speed and take notes, I'd still probably get about a quarter of that because that is some good stuff, man.
So I see we got some other speakers up here. We've got Karan, we've got Thomas, we've got Joe. Any of you guys feel like chiming in? Would love to hear from you.
I got a quick question for Dark. Do you think they have
BitPetro, you
a
are not Karan, Joe, or Thomas, but that's interesting.
I know, but it's on the topic that
Okay,
he's
all
hitting.
right. I'm just
How long?
saying. Yeah, I'm just read the room. Some people read the room, others. Okay, no, go ahead.
How long is the run room if they keep issuing these convertible bonds? I mean, like if they have 8% that they have to pay out, I mean, like how many more times can they whack that button before they get into some real trouble?
Well, so they don't get in trouble. Are you talking about the perpetual preferreds, like Strife
Ye-
and Strike?
Yeah, because they're actually having to pay out, 8% on those.
Well, remember, they don't have to pay it, right? It's cumulative, but they don't have to pay a dividend. The board can vote not to pay a dividend. So that's one thing. But remember, they have the ability to tap the capital markets, sell stock, and pay off the dividend. They can sell more preferreds and use some of that money for corporate. Uh, I don't. Right. Remember, they're acquiring Bitcoin. It's not like they're taking the money and speculating with it. Although some might say they are. I don't think they are. I think they're buying the world's best asset. Right. So in the end, I think what they've done is created a flywheel. Right. They're able to buy Bitcoin in an accretive fashion. Right. That's not dilutive with these preferreds. So it's absolutely a brilliant strategy. And as long as fiat capital wants to get into Bitcoin, which it seems like there's an insatiable desire to get out of a depreciating dollar into an appreciating asset, right? Like it just seems like a no-brainer. Remember, all of this is only made possible by the fact that we have an out-of-control Fed, an out-of-control Congress, an out-of-control government that is spending money they don't have, right? And it doesn't take a genius to figure out, wow, would I rather be in a deflationary asset like Bitcoin or an inflationary asset where I'm being debased like the US dollar? That's what creates the flywheel,
Yeah,
right?
I want to add
If
one
they,
thing to that. I think the one aspect that is a little bit risky, but they seem to recognize that is Strife, because you're right, they can suspend or not pay the dividends on Strike, on Stride for sure. That's like a junk bond. It's non-cumulative, that one, but Strife is declared in advance and payable. And if they suspend it, it starts to accumulate, and then there's a step up in what they call the price of sort of a liquidation price. So the Strife is something that's very special, and that's why you'll notice that they issued 21 billion authorized of Strike, and who knows the same amount for Stride, but only 2 billion for Strife. Strife is going to be like this very, very special pearl of a bond.
Yeah, my take on Strife is that it was Saylor's attempt to get the market to give his company a rating, right? So he can't get the rating agencies to do it. So he turns around and says, okay, I'm just going to have the market rate MicroStrategy,
Yeah.
right? And right now it's what, triple B based on the dividend, maybe even a little bit lower. But as Strife appreciates, right, you get a rating from the market, which is more important than a rating from S&P, Fitch, or Moody's.
Well, plus you can apply for a rating for a specific tranche of securities. You can say, I'm only applying for this preferred stock, this rating for the preferred stock, and you can ask for that. And if you've sacrificed, say, the Stride investors to some extent, they're the sacrificial anode, if you will, if you know voting at all. They're the sacrificial anode, and the Stride spread between Stride and Strife will eventually, if we have a bear market, it's widen out a lot. Strife will trade a lot richer, in my opinion. Strife is going to trade through treasuries, means it'll be the first securities ever that trade at a lower interest rate than treasuries. My opinion.
I agree. And that will be the moment when Bitcoin is seen as pristine collateral. And I think that's his goal.
Exactly. And there'll be listen, the Bitcoin that sits in sort of the treasury of MicroStrategy is going to be sort of, you can say it's Bitcoin per share in terms of common, but it's really going to be safeguarding that strife. And that's going to be the pristine collateral of all pristine collaterals. It's going to trade literally through treasuries. It's going to trade as close to zero interest rates as possible. And you can look up yourself the present value of perpetuity.
Let's
Yeah,
go
it's
to
funny
Tommy
because
Boy when you're done, Dark.
just real
Yeah,
quick, I always get a lot of questions on Strike versus Strife. And when I look at the two securities, I think Strife, STRF, has more upside than Strike, simply because Strike is callable, right? And Strife is not.
Yeah, and especially the strange thing is in a cyclical downturn, that's when Strife sits there and proves its mettle the most.
Thomas.
yeah. So I would just ask Josh and Dark to comment. We're going to approach the end of the month here. It feels like I think MicroStrategy with the price of Bitcoin over 100 is likely to have the positive retained earnings for the 12 trailing months. So then they become S&P 500 eligible. I don't know the politics around getting them included, but could you guys talk a little bit about how the passive capital flows that come from index investing will change the volatility and the capital structure and flows of all these products that MSTR is issuing?
I'll just say quickly this, parenthetically. I don't sit on the committee. I would not be surprised to find that the committee decides to require an extra quarter of compliance before they actually approve entry. I mean, that's not unusual at all. So I think that you could see a situation where they qualify as of June 30th, and then it's not until September 30th or even December 30th at the worst that they're approved for entry into this, because they would like to see that the company's not going to sort of go up and then come back down again. Now, you all know my opinion that next year we're going to hit 444,000. So I'm looking at a very long-term, extended cycle bull market that I think is going to guarantee that we're not going to go trade back down hard until we hit 444. And that's going to give a chance for MicroStrategy to get into the index in December and not even have any sweat. I don't think the actual Bitcoin market really takes off until the beginning of January.
So
Yeah,
Josh,
I'm with.
I would just say
Yeah, just real quick,
what is the
Thomas. Yeah, I would just add that, remember, the committee held Tesla out of the S&P 500 for years, right? And the committee will not have a difficult time making the argument that Strategy is some type of financial engineering company and not a software company,
Yeah,
right? Even though their operating business is software.
and they may be cautious because they're concentrating on voting power. Listen, it is a fact that Michael Saylor has these Class B shares at 10 times voting power because he had more than 50% of the voting power when he voted to have, when the vote was taken to have that class created. That's got to be the fact. So if you wanted to put me in the position of them, I would say, listen, let me just be frank with you, Mr. Saylor. We would like you to convert to common A shareholder so you're in the same boat with everybody else. And then you would have to see whether Michael Saylor would be willing to do that or not. Because right now he's getting 10-1 vote for the power of the cost of the shares. And the power and the value of common shares is the vote itself, period.
Yeah, and Thomas, just so you're aware that they're I don't know if Thomas is
Hey,
breaking up a little
Thomas.
bit.
Yeah, we're losing you. Joe's speaking at the moment. Go ahead, Joe.
I was just going to comment that the last 10 included companies of the S&P 500 declined after inclusion, including Tesla. Tesla put in a multi-year top in after its inclusion and sold off. So that's not exactly how passive flows work. You know, they concentrate heavily towards the market cap of the mega caps. So the inclusion itself doesn't necessarily not necessarily a good thing. Personally, I would rather them not be included.
Yeah, I agree with Joe. The other thing is, as the company increases in value, it becomes a bigger part of the index, and then all of a sudden now your beta begins to approach that of the S&P 500. So if you believe MicroStrategy is going to 1,000 or 2,000 and splitting again, then you really don't want MicroStrategy part of the S&P 500. I can make a really good argument why a shareholder would say, "Nah, thanks, but no thanks."
You just correlate it with the greater options complex so that when there's a sell-off in the S&P 500, MicroStrategy gets hit. Why would you want that as an investor? To me, I don't want that
Ex-
at all.
Exactly my point.
And you've already seen that correlation with Mag 7. The only thing that I say, and this is a little bit socialist of me, is that I believe in Bitcoin. And I love the idea that inclusion in the index would expose Bitcoin to a greater number of people in pension funds, ERISA funds throughout the world. That's my only hang up about the idea of inclusion. I love that aspect of it.
Karan, how's it going?
Does the include?
Oh, Thomas, we lost you. Are you back for a while? You still on the New Jersey Turnpike?
I'm in bumblefuck Delaware driving to Virginia, but the last question I have, and I'll just go on mute, is if they qualify, I assume they're not going to get included this first round, but if at some point they do.
All right.
We lost him.
We've lost you,
So
Thomas. Go ahead,
close.
Karan.
So close.
All right. Hey guys, great conversation. Just want to go back to the conversation that Josh and Dark were having about the converts and the ratings. I think the S&P inclusion. I completely agree with both Joe and Dark. I think if it happens, fine, but we'll have all the downside of that correlation as well. So I think Josh's point about the fact that hey. It'd be nice to get exposure. I think it's good for that, but I do think the greater exposure to the options complex. I don't know if that makes sense or not. So that's one point. On the point regarding, so when I was sitting at the capital markets desk at JP Morgan on the fixed income side, we'd have crossover we had a prop desk for our converts as well. I think Josh's point, this is really critical. The size of that convert market is so fucking tiny. It's so tiny. And it's primarily these hedge funds that are arbing the trade and are actually pushing down the value of the subsequent equity to do their by shorting it. I think the fact that he's not doing converts, I think everybody should be happy about it. If you're not happy about it, you don't understand how that security works. The other piece is when you think about like all of the stuff that he's doing with Strike and Strikes. In my mind, like so we placed billions and billions of dollars of fixed income to everything from folks who wanted just a straight cash pay bond to guys who were willing to sit at the back half of the cap structure and take a pick like a pay in kind note and do 0% coupon bonds at subordinated to the unsecured paper. Like that market is so fucking big that's looking for a yield, and it's not necessarily cash yield, but it is a yield, right? And so in my mind, when I think about what he's doing with Strike and Stripe and buying $2 billion worth of Bitcoin, not issuing any ATM, I think this is a bit of a speculative attack on this massive bond market. There's going to be, it's not going to be a hedge fund trade, but it's going to be guys like Fidelity that are going to be in it. It's going to be, folks who are a bit more on the back end that are credit funds that are going to be involved in it. And then the last piece I'll make on this, I think this is an important point too, just in terms of ratings. I think it'll be really nice if they could get ratings, but I just don't see how we get to a place because whether it's S&P or Moody's or Fitch, even if you go to get a piece of debt rated, which is a tranche, they have to do an implied rating for you corporate, right? And typically, in order to get a bond rated, you need two things. Either you need to have operational cash flow, which are securing the bonds, or the bond could be unsecured, but there's an underlying cash flow component to it, or you are actually specifically asking to collateralize and do some kind of a securitization, and they will rate that securitization complex. So until we get to a place where he's saying, "Hey, I'm going to buy these Bitcoin, and this pool of Bitcoin is specifically set aside for this security," that's the easiest way for him to kind of start getting tranche ratings. But obviously, I think that has a lot of unintended consequences. So I don't see ratings in his future anytime soon. I think the S&P inclusion is going to be a little bit of a nothing burger. And I agree with the rest of the team here. Buy Bitcoin, put it in cold storage, and Josh, man, 444, baby, let's go.
Rusty, did you want to slow the conversation down?
Come on, Terence, man. I actually was gonna call on Karan and get his input because I did CLOs and I know getting tranches rated, and I was curious his input on that, which he just kind of answered. And then I was gonna ask if Josh had some ideas about that or Dark on had they heard anything about some of the preferreds being rated at all, so. I know that Sailor's desire at the end of the call, his first quarter call, that's all he kept talking about was getting rated. And I was like, all right, well, what's holding you back? And then, I mean, I know there's a lot at it, but
Listen, he started
he's
using this
doing a
term
lot of
coverage.
unique things. So
Yeah, Rusty. He started using this term coverage ratio a lot, which is S&P speak. For the now there is no codicil in the contract of the prospectus for the preferred. But if you look at it very clearly and you thought about it and you look at the capital structure and you allow down in your mind all the convertible bonds to go sort of they're eventually going to all convert into equity, right? So now they're all gone. Just take them out of the picture, and all you're left with is these preferreds and common. What you end up with is Strife is the senior most liability. And I say that word on purpose. It's not an asset, it's a liability of the corporation because the stock, that is the equity of a company, is not a claim to the assets. I've always said that's the only problem I have with this idea of Bitcoin per share because the common shareholder doesn't own that Bitcoin. He owns a call option on that Bitcoin with the exercise price being the market value of all the liabilities of the corporation. The primary of which would be Strife. But Stride can basically be defaulted on over time. You could just decide to not declare, not pay dividends. Stripe is cumulative, and that's why it's only $2 billion. It's going to be a very special little pearl in its oyster. And I think that's going to be the one that I would choose to get a rating on if you asked me to be him. And he's using this term coverage ratio over and over again. And a coverage ratio is something that the rating agencies would request him set aside in some sort of a recourse, not a non-recourse account. Maybe he would do that. I just don't know. That's up to him.
Yeah, hey Josh, totally agree with that. I think on a non-recourse basis that'd be hard to do. Just the way, and listen, uh, at the sake of sounding a little elitist, like I think the smartest guys in finance don't go work at rating agencies, right? Like I mean, these guys are not the ones who are out there specifically, changing the game. Everything goes into a formula, and there's a spreadsheet, and you can just knock your head against their building 10 times trying to get them to change their thesis, and they won't. So I think that's the piece. The other thing, I hear this quite a bit, and I heard it earlier in this conversation too. It's just like, okay, well, they're doing these preferred. They're going to have all these obligations, whether it's cash or PIK. And when do they get to a point where they're in real trouble, and the liabilities they have out to the security holders exceed their ability to pay them? And it's just like, guys, if you were actually doing the convert, you've pre-sold that equity at a very, very cheap option price. Here, what you're doing is you're saying, fine, I'm going to go ahead and issue all of these preferreds, and yeah, there might be some cash component or some PIK component to it, but I can wait to pay that, and I can time the market and use the ATM in a way where I'm not diluting myself as much. So it's actually a more beneficial way for people who are in the common equity for them to go ahead and do these preferreds and then use their ATM to maybe satiate or satisfy some of the obligations they'll have that'll arise from issuing these preferreds. Then kind of like, oh, listen, I have a 0% coupon bond. It doesn't come due for 4 years, but like it's going to convert at a price, and there's going to be massive dilution, way more.
Okay, so quickly, Quran uses an industry term called PIK. That's pay in kind. It's basically the ultimate altcoin. Basically, the company pays you more of the same thing, again, instead of actual cash dollars. Pay in kind. Sorry.
Yeah, no, spot on. And there's a market for, obviously, when we were doing, the crazy time LBOs, we had all kinds of layer cake capital structures. And if you could promise yield to somebody, there's somebody out there who will go out and take that piece of security. But the reason Saylor wants the ratings is and Josh can speak to it, Dark can speak to it. If he gets the ratings, his pool of capital just absolutely explodes. Right, we're talking about folks like PIMCO who are sitting on billions and billions of dollars, and the other piece people have to really understand: when you invest in fixed income, you have a very natural investment cycle because you're collecting cash coupons, and your cash position as a total of your total position continues to accrete. So you kind of get unbalanced because of all the cash coupons you're collecting, so you have no choice but keep reinvesting. Whereas if you're an equity investor, you can buy your equity and sit, and depending on how the equity is performing, maybe you have to rebalance or not. When you invest in fixed income or preferreds and you have some kind of a yield coming, especially in cash, that has to get reinvested, and that market requires a rating. And listen, if something changes or the org structure changes and Saylor can go get a rating, look out. I think that's when this thing just gets crazy exciting, because we're talking about I don't know, the capital pool is 10x, 20x, 30x what he's looking at right now.
Justin Welter.
Hey guys, curious to know. I'm hearing a lot of talk about the S&P 500 inclusion, and I'm trying to articulate this to myself a little bit and understand a little bit from what you guys are saying. But when I think of the S&P, the inclusion, I'm thinking about all the passive income that's going to go into the stock via whatever the market, and the opportunity that's going to lead to the raising in NAV as a result, and then ultimately also the increase in BTC per share via the ATM. But what I'm hearing from you guys is that there's the bigger opportunity is really around the preferred and the fixed income market, as opposed to even like pursuing the risk that comes with the S&P 500. Am I correct in that, or am I totally off? Like, I'm just trying to wrap my head around that, because I'm hearing a lot of like downside from the S&P. I don't really hear much upside, so I just wanted to kind of better understand how everybody's thinking about that. Thanks.
Hey, Justin, were you speaking? No one could hear you for the last minute.
Oh man.
No, I'm
Sorry,
just
guys.
kidding. I'm just kidding. Anyone want to respond? Dark, you want to take
Yeah,
that?
yeah, I'll take it. Look, ultimately, while you think you want inclusion to the S&P 500 for passive flows, I don't think you really do, because I think you want MicroStrategy levered to the price of Bitcoin and not so much levered to the price of the stock market, right? So if you get S&P inclusion and MicroStrategy continues to grow and becomes a bigger part of a cap weighted index, then you're going to assume a beta, meaning every time the stock market sells off, MicroStrategy will sell off, right? And I just don't see how that's a positive for MicroStrategy or the Bitcoin complex.
Vinny.
Hey, what's up, guys? Thanks for having me. Yeah, great conversation. I don't really have too much to add on the previous topic. I just wanted to see if we could potentially have Josh talk a little bit about MetaPlanet, because I see your posts that you're pretty knee deep in the MetaPlanet trade, and just wanted to see if it was like a pure money play or if there was like a long-term thesis that you had. Thanks.
Well, I'm proud. Listen, I'm going to defer to actually climbers. I think it's wrong for me to start getting out there and espousing my MetaPlanet just because I have a big book. I decided to take risks in a very lumpy fashion. It's sort of like I look at something and I go, well, I can see now that I'm going to miss this chance on this dip. I better BTFD. And so I BTFD the heck out of it. And I own 10 million shares. Yes. I do think that there is a room for that stock because of the way that the company is being run, to allow the MNAV front. I mean, you have to have the CEO first define the MNAV scope as being +5, +10, right? And that's one of the things that kind of gave me pause about Saylor to begin with, although I think he's changing, is that he at one point sort of defined the upper limit of MNAV as being 2.5. And I always said to Potter Jeff, no, MNAV can go wherever it wants. It can go wherever it wants. It's like, why is a dog? Well, I'm not going to tell that joke, but because it can, that's the only reason. So I'm going to say now that I think that the guys at MetaPlanet are running that show with the understanding that they have this special thing. It's the only way for the Japanese to invest in a corporation that has a leveraged Bitcoin entity, and that they can allow the MNAV to run to 10 times if they want to, and if they believe that it can happen, it can, because they control the monopoly power of the pricing. And the TSC has certain rules that are not going to they're going to be advantageous to the stock, and would allow this MNAV to expand. I don't have a problem with the MNAV theoretically being a 10. But it's just that Saylor started to run the MNAV down because he had so much competition in the U.S. That's all I have to say about that.
Josh, are you at all worried about, because it looks like right now it's kind of the GBTC play, right? And so that's why the NAV is so high. If they were to introduce something like an ETF over there, do you think that stock would be in some serious trouble?
Yeah, I think that could be a risk. There's no doubt, and I don't see any sign that they're planning to do that. I think that listen, they're literally saying, look, Simon literally said to Jim Canos, "Do you want some borrow?" I don't know if you caught that. He's like, "You want to borrow some shares to short us?" That's a sign of a person who understands what he's got, which is this ability to have something priced wherever it wants to. 2 times ridiculous is still ridiculous. That's something we used to say. Bruce Cover, my former boss, used to say, when you're looking to short something, just remember this: 2 times ridiculous is still just ridiculous. It's not like it's 5 times ridiculous. It's just ridiculous, and you're going to get stopped out one way or the other. And I don't have a problem with any of these LBEs in sort of segregated markets like Tokyo trading at multiples of 5 to 10 times. I don't have a problem with that. That's all I have to say. But actually, Clymer is really the expert in that. I want to defer to him.
Yeah, I was gonna say we were talking about this yesterday, and Dark had a lot to say too. If Dark wants to talk about it, but just the sort of inflated valuation of this thing right now, and the perception versus the reality, and what the effects could be. Yeah, go ahead, Dark.
Yeah, I would just say, like, you have to remember Josh is a trader and he's a damn good one, right? So he's going to look at a whole bunch of issues, and if something changes, he's going to sell, right? That's how he rolls.
I will. That's true.
So
Sorry.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, it's not a long-term position. He's making a bet, and he's watching screens, and he's on top of what's going on. When he talks about Bruce Kovner, yeah, the Caxton team, incredible traders, right? Absolutely incredible. I dealt with them for a long time, just some of the smartest guys on the street. And he's absolutely right. Two times ridiculous is just ridiculous. And we've all of us traders that have been in that position of shorting something we know is worthless, but watching it just go straight higher, right? And that's the play.
Yeah, the majority of people should just save in Bitcoin and take a nap, which is what I just told Lauren because he keeps sending me question marks about the conversation.
His name is Lauren Ottle. You have to give him a break.
Yeah, he can't help himself. He used to drive the short bus to school.
He's not even here, and you're still clowning him, Terence. I love it.
He's listening in right now.
I was gonna say it's crazy to me how like the average person gets so obsessed with this stuff and like tries to come into these spaces or wherever they're trying to get their information and thinks that they can play the market, and it's like I just implore people to study Bitcoin as much as you possibly can, because to Dark's point, like, you know, these are people like Dark and Josh, like they've spent like I don't know, 20, 30 plus years doing this stuff. So just be careful and realize that, like, I just want to hammer home the point of time horizon. Like, please work on your low time preference and just zoom out. The more you can do that, if you're in this, there's a lot of people in this room, the more you can do that, the better, in my opinion, because otherwise you're looking at these arbitrage moments that are very tricky and difficult to analyze.
Yeah, I would just add to that. Look, I love my family. I love my kids. I really like Bitcoin, right? I don't love companies, right? Companies come, they go, they do stupid shit. They're just run by people, right? So ultimately, I have a trader's approach to any investment on fiat rails. But as far as Bitcoin's concerned, Bitcoin self-custody is the gold standard.
Amen. Hey, Road Warrior. I'm not sure if you had your hand up, but I see you joined the stage. What's on your mind today?
Oh, I'm really happy Josh is on. I think I follow Josh a little too much on X and comment a little too much on his posts, and I just appreciative of him jumping on, and appreciative of everyone else in the space today. Not a whole lot. Oh, I will toot my own horn. I did get in Meadow Planet lower than Josh, so yay for me. Nothing specific. Another day at the office, catching some space on a lunch break, to be honest.
So, Cosmo, I think we lost Thomas. We still have Dark and Josh. I've invited Gary up, and I actually see Preston out there in the audience. He might just be listening, but
He's got an invite, so anytime he wants to come up, he's welcome.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I put up in the nest. I mean, actually, Preston retweeted that from Scott Bessent talking about stablecoins and the Genius Act stuff. I don't know if we want to return to that topic, but yeah, I think that he actually mentions that a lot of times unprompted, and I think it's a big signal is where the administration's head is at in terms of the future of the bond market and where the treasuries are going to go in the future. Lots of private hands, and what the stablecoin market looks for, the issuance of debt. So I don't know. It's pretty interesting. And it looks.
Hey, Thomas, I think we have you
We
back.
got him
Are you off
back.
the? Yeah, he's off the freeway.
Yeah, I'm just doing a road trip, so these spaces are great to listen to. I've done a few of these road trips. My mother's in assisted living, so I just go down and check on her every 3 or 4 months. So this is that. So I appreciate you guys filling up the boring road here in the middle of nowhere in Delaware.
Hey guys, I have to hop off to take a call. I just wanted to send a really special thanks to Josh for coming up. I really appreciate you. I appreciate your takes. awesome trader, amazing commentator, and thank you so much for coming up, man. I really appreciate you. I gotta hop off. Thanks, everybody. Have an awesome day.
Thanks, Dark. Josh, feel free to stay here with us, or if you're sick of our bad jokes, you can also leave.
I'm just listening in the background. Go ahead, guys.
All right. Hey, Justin, we haven't heard much from you today. What's on your mind? You definitely have been paying close attention to the stable coins and to a lot of legislation lately. And I think you tend to take slightly different takes than the hive mind. Want to chime in at all?
How specifically, Terrence? Yeah, I'm just watching it. I have my own opinions. They're worth exactly what you pay for them. But no, I think Jesse talked earlier that he thinks that the government is using stable coins to bring in Bitcoin adoption. I definitely disagree with that. Government has monopoly on violence, and they rule the world by printing dollars and defending the US dollar. So they'll never stop doing that. They'll never choose to stop doing that. So yeah, just watching developments, but in no way do I think the government or any politicians have our best interests at heart. They're going to, excuse me, try to exploit Bitcoin for political grift, power, and money. But as far as doing the right thing with it, absolutely not.
Yeah, it's almost like the stable coins are more of like a stepping stone towards bit bonds is kind of the way I would look at it, because they want to continue to strengthen the dollar, um, and attract, investments, and we have to pay for our debt, and this just obviously is instant and digital. And when you think about it, that we have all this cash already, and cash is a little bit like Bitcoin in that you don't know where it came from. It's permissionless. It's 24/7, 365. It's just not digital. And so the stablecoins will do that, and it'll probably help a lot of disadvantaged people, especially all the authoritarian regimes and whatnot, who just desperately want the dollar. And you hear these stories about some of them even having to trade in shit coins like Tron and whatnot, who can't even get into Bitcoin. So stablecoin would, of course, be better to that. But
Speaking of the debt stuff, did you see Trump came out yesterday and publicly asked for a 200 basis points rate cut? That's what he wants. He wants 200, maybe 250, something like that. And right now, the CME futures, we've got, a 99.9% chance that we don't move, but he's really gunning for that cut, man. So I think, I don't know how much debt that would clear out. He was saying like 800 billion or something like that to cut that big, but I don't think he's going to get that.
I wish we could get Infra in here. It's time to get him back.
I'll DM him. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with getting infra. We also have Dave up here. I'd love to hear from him. But real quick to respond to Justin, just for clarity, I'm with you, man. I never said that the intentions of the government were good. I would call it more of a capitulation than anything else. That they see they have to bend the knee to start to move toward a Bitcoin standard. But I definitely agree with you in that they're going to do everything they can to take advantage of people along that journey.
stablecoins will be good for Bitcoin, whether we like the journey there or not. It's that much closer. It's a portal for more people to finally accept that they can hold something on their phone, and they have the public private key pairs. And I just think they start to learn of the new digital world that we're in, because they're just going to see it as a dollar, which they largely have anyway.
Yeah, it's just another form of altcoin, right? And so it's just going to bring more adoption in. But yeah, the governments definitely don't have our best interests in mind.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily an altcoin. The thing about the stablecoin that's really cool is that most of that understanding of what the dollar is versus their own currency is already there, right? And so a lot of that adoption requires some sort of knowledge or information. And since that's already there, I feel like it kind of expedites that process into like, the digital currency realm, if you want to call it that. And because they kind of get it right off the bat. It's like, oh, okay, dollars. We got some hands up. Let's do Taylor and then Dave.
Just a kind of a question for everyone. Do any of you guys view stable coins as a way for like the Fed and some of the big banks, like maybe the JP Morgans, et cetera, like to just be able to cut out all of the bloat in the banking system and cut out all the community banks and just totally throw them all under the bus and just go direct to the world with with the dollar, with the treasuries, et cetera, and just like basically the same way that that Amazon, for example, always is pro like the $15 minimum wage or whatever, because they know that they can compete at that level, but that their competitors cannot. These big banks, et cetera, could kind of use the stablecoin to just kind of screw over all their little competitors, et cetera, and just take a bigger, ever increasing amount of power and market share. I don't know if that makes any sense. So that's kind of the commentary I was looking for there.
That's actually a question I'm going to answer anyway. So, look, you don't need conspiracy theories to understand a few simple axioms. Axiom number one: every big company views regulation as a competitive weapon. Full stop. There's no question about that. It's 100% true. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about banks or pharma, hell, even tobacco companies use it in ways that would probably drive you crazy if you knew. So just assume that. So is it that JP Morgan looking at stablecoins in particular? No, they don't want stablecoins. They love float. They love the banking system being inefficient. But it's like any other war. You defend the turf that's easy to defend. It's really hard to defend an inefficient banking system that takes 3 days for money to move from point A to point B, and that's what we have today. That's sort of an average, and stablecoins is going to take that 3 days down to 3 seconds. So then you're J.P. Morgan. You say, okay, how do we make more money from this, or at least protect our franchises? And that's going to be the actions you're going to see them taking. So look at it that way. So that's thing number one. Truth number two: the government is not a monolith. Everyone who says the government exists to perpetuate wars and do this and do that, no. The government is a collection of individuals who all want the most money and power they can. Some are better than others. Some have more morality than others, like anything else. None, unfortunately, at least I have yet to come across one, is a completely public servant. I mean, sure, there are as I said, there are certain people in the government who I think actually are interested in public service. But it's pretty hard to find somebody who will act against their own self-interest. And I don't care what party you're in, etc. The self-interest is what matters. So now you have to ask yourself the question: what is the self-interest of various people? Well, the self-interest of the previous administration was driven by Elizabeth Warren, who believed that we should leave banking in the 19th century, early 20th century, and not move it, and fight like hell against everything that this industry wants to do. So when we start talking about why are stablecoins important, I find it unbelievable that people don't remember how many crypto firms couldn't get bank accounts at all. And with the stablecoin world, that is gone as a consideration. It literally will never happen again. It is the only way to be certain of that. So understanding at its base layer what it means. The second thing that it means is if you have a banking system which can move money in seconds, and everyone in Web3, everyone in Bitcoin can use it. I don't care if it's what it means. If you're doing Bitcoin to fiat moves, stable coins will make it faster. The other big thing that people keep forgetting is what it means for any tokenized asset whatsoever. Effectively, doing a swap is very well trodden, whether it's via DeFi or CeFi or OTC, it doesn't matter. We all know how, and we're getting much better UI UX on this move from a stable coin to Bitcoin, or a stable coin to a yield bearing asset, or to a shitcoin. And so, whether or not Bitcoin will win in such a world, which I do think it will from a value point of view, and while not a maxi, I certainly believe that Bitcoin is the only true monetary asset there is. It will matter. And so having the entirety of the world used to or able to access payments via stablecoins means the entirety of the world can now buy Bitcoin and do so without you having to explain it to them like they're 3 years old and have them be terrified when they switch from one thing to another. So to me, that's the big reason why this matters. Carlo, the DeFi defender, likes to call it the Trojan horse. I mean, yes, that's true in the sense, but it's much more obvious. It's like the Trojan horse, where the people opening the doors to the castle kind of know what they're letting into the castle, but really don't see an alternative. And you have a group of people in this administration, whether it's David Sachs or even the president and his family who are actively campaigning for this and are looking to profit on this transition. So to me, it seems pretty baked in the cake that it will become a profitable transition. So that's sort of my thought process. That last thing to say. In no way am I defending the fiat system. I attribute much of the ills of society to it. In no way am I defending the notion of governments who believe they have to license or regulate everything. I'm not defending that at all. In fact, I'm very libertarian on those issues. But I do think we have to practically understand, what drives people incentives if you want to try to figure out what's going to happen next.
Yeah, if I could just piggyback off you, Dave, I love your takes. Like every single time, I feel like you're so spot on. And just a couple things to again punctuate here. It's like the powers that be are going to take advantage of this situation, right? And that's what Dave's talking about with self-interest and these people that are going to get rich off of it. But at the end of the day, if you look at the other side of the coin, pun intended, like this is a good thing. Like this is, basically, let's talk in logical terms. Western Union and money transfers and ACH and all this wires, like they're all going away. Like JP Morgan, all the banks, they realize like this stuff is going away. We have to adapt. And to Dave's point, like it's an adoption curve thing. So this is going to accelerate the adoption curve tremendously. And it's going to create exchange rates, exchange between currencies and digital currencies is just going to be so much easier. So thanks for the take, Dave. It's just amazing and very eloquent.
T Swizzle.
Yeah, I think the point Dave made also about how the government is not a monolith is also very prescient, and I don't think it's even as simple as everyone's trying to get the most power, etc., as power and money as they can. I think it's a lot along the lines of how James Madison wrote about it, where there's factions, many factions that rise up and they have competing interests, etc. And I think you could like really describe a lot of it as there's truly evil people in government, and a lot of those people are after power and money. And then you also have truly good and patriotic people, etc., that want what's best for their country and for their families and for their wives and their children. And I think those factions are always kind of at war with each other. And some of those evil people are, those are captured people, they're blackmailed people, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a lot more complex than just the drive for power and money. There's a lot going on there at any given time. But I think that was a great point by Dave overall about how it's a it's not just a big monolith. And I think that's something worth thinking about and mulling over quite a bit.
Yeah, we had very, very vivid proof of this recently. I mean, so you could say whatever you want about Doge and about Elon. I'm personally a big fan, but and we'll defend that for a lot of reasons. But most important, what we learned with USAID and we learned with the whole NGO nonsense, the fact that there are 400 NGOs, non-governmental organizations, who have received federal funds that have banded together in order to resist this administration is just an unbelievable fact. The fact that they couldn't get legislation even sponsored in the House or the Senate to effectively ban all NGOs from making political contributions, or to have NGOs have relatives like arm's length relatives, the kind of thing you do for insider trading, i.e., wives, dependents, etc., getting compensation from NGOs that receive federal funding, is telling you something. It's telling you that it is not a coincidence that the Beltway, that the counties in Northern Virginia and in Maryland inside the Beltway are the richest in the country, is not a coincidence, and it's because of corruption and graft from all of this stuff. And yet, neither party is willing to really go after it hammer and tongs. So we know what's going on. I mean, it's not like we learned something over the last few months, over the last 6 months, that we may have suspected, but now we know it. So, Taylor's point is absolutely right. Yeah, there are some people who want to fight against this, but there's a structural problem, and we just need to understand how that structural problem is if you're going to try to make an outcome happen.
Justin, you went off mic. Did you want to chime in on this?
I don't have much positive to say, man. I mean, so if an individual decides that they're going to go to Washington, D.C. with the best of intentions, they want the best for their country, how in the world does that work? So you choose one of the two parties. You feel that one or the other is the answer, and you're going to show up in Washington. How are you going to get funded? How are you going to move against this immovable monolith and do what's best for your country? How many people in Congress right now would fit that bill? I wonder that if we looked at all of them, I forget how many hundred there are that truly are there to do what's best for their country. It- Pardon my endless skepticism on that. I like what Eric Cason says about that, and I probably shouldn't repeat it right now. So I have nothing positive whatsoever to say about the horribly broken system and trying to operate within that with the best of intentions. Impossible.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, you're right.
yeah, Justin. That was my point with Madison. Is it's James Madison and the Federalist and Anti-Federalist back and forth. Uh, he that's what he predicted happening. He predicted that this thing would fall apart because of these factions within our government, and that he wrote it that at length. I don't
If,
remember.
if you want an acid test, force a roll call vote of who would support 12-year term limits for Congress for both houses. The only ones who will support it are the ones that's a baseline qualification. It's necessary, not sufficient, but necessary to prove that you're one of the good ones.
I'm
It,
You're not
guessing
going to
it's
get a
four
lot of
people.
support.
4 people is what I would think it is.
so Justin, I mean, you're absolutely right, and I mean, I don't think you need to apologize for your viewpoints. I mean, they're rooted in reality, and I would call you a realist, and Dave as well, Taylor as well, and Dave, I'm glad you brought up Elon, right? I think Elon is such a controversial character for a bunch of reasons. I'm a huge fan of Elon as well, Dave, and I will continue to stand by that. I know Taylor has done a ton of research on this, and Taylor, I went down the rabbit hole with you on your thoughts about Elon, and I encourage other people to DM Taylor or check out his content around that because it's pretty fascinating, and I think that's arguably the most clear example of the corruption that we're talking about. I mean, here's a guy who spent hundreds of millions of dollars or whatever it was and worked for free for the government to try to fix this thing and actually put together a system that was working, and at the expense of his own reputation, at the expense of his businesses, at the expense of people blowing up his cars and all his products. He stood in there and tried to do this, and what happened? He got shut down. I mean, come on. I mean, if there isn't a bigger example of the corruption, I don't know what to tell you. So I think people should stop thinking about red and blue. I mean, especially given what's going on with the current administration and their inability to act on what they ran on, and it's pretty crystal clear. Go ahead, Taylor.
Yeah.
Anybody?
Yeah,
Well, and if there's any green flag for Bitcoin, it's the fact that, we had this huge coalition to go in there and try to fix the budget, and they found a lot of stuff, but did they change anything? No. They weren't able to do much because there's just massive amounts of corruption and gridlock and all that stuff. So if there's any green flag for Bitcoin, it's got to be something like that. Go ahead, Taylor.
yeah, but yeah, Jesse's totally right about how it's obviously not red versus blue. I mean, that's I think pretty apparent to most people now, and to libertarians, that's been very apparent for a long time. But Balaji has talked about at length and written at length, and I usually find Balaji to be a little wordy personally, and kind of I don't always agree with him. But something I do agree with him on is he believes strongly that it is now orange versus green, which is Bitcoin versus the dollar, and that as Justin's saying, the guy going to Washington, it's a zero chance of being able to make any meaningful difference. The only way we're going to break this is by leveraging the entire world's economy, and the tool we have, the lever we have to do that with is Bitcoin, and we should all be holding as much Bitcoin as we can accumulate in cold storage and holding our own keys and seeking to reach that tipping point to where we can break the fiat cartel, and that's my belief.
And let's be
So
clear, that really began in 1913 with the establishment of the Federal Reserve.
Ugh.
So
Yeah, I've been writing about that today too. Yeah, before we go into the Federal Reserve, I just want to make a very simple point. Never before in the Bitcoin history, and we've had the rally that we've had, has it been true that the people who have their fingers on the buttons of power and the levers of power agree with the sentiment that you just said? I mean, it's not, you don't have to get much clearer than listening to Eric or Don Jr. Talk about Bitcoin, or the Secretary of the Treasury talk about Bitcoin, or various and sundry other people outside of the government, but who obviously have the ear of the government, namely Larry Fink, etc. I mean, it is not remotely. There's an expression in trading: "Don't fight the Fed." But if you're basically short Bitcoin, if you believe Bitcoin is going to go where I think we all think it's going to go, then you're effectively fighting the United States federal government at this point. Just think about that. I mean, and think about, consider that Bitcoin was an insurgency from most of its life. And now those insurgents have power. Now, maybe they won't keep power. Maybe they won't be able to do what people want. Maybe, the notion of the government buying Bitcoin is sufficiently distasteful to people. And I'm stunned that Justin hasn't given me the frowny face or the thumbs down yet, because the idea of the government owning a substantial amount of Bitcoin probably gives most Bitcoiners significant dyspepsia. But the fact that they believe it's going to go up in value should tell you something. And don't expect them to telegraph their moves. Is all I'll say. I think that's a really important point.
Let me respond quick. I know we got Julius with a hand up, but like Dave is saying right there, if you're expecting to fight the government, it should be clear that that's the communist government that overthrew our republic in 1913 that we're fighting against. Exactly like Justin just brought up. This is the this is the second American Revolution. This is the fight against the freaking the bastards that took our country. And that's my opinion.
Yo, old, it's not an easy battle, but there's fucking power in numbers. And I think we've proven that time and time again. I really love the analogy of green versus orange. That really is, I like that a lot. But I do like definitely think that it's kind of all just become manipulation and like games, and people are just accumulating. So I feel like it's super anti-libertarian to be shorting Bitcoin in general, bro.
Hey, Puncher, Cosmo marked you down as a tardy for today. I mean, I was going to give you a pass, but he's pretty strict.
I've got a
Um,
20-minute rule and then you're tardy.
sorry. I am just finished up a board meeting with the Scottsdale Mint and the Wyoming Reserve in Casper, Wyoming. The noises you can hear in the background is precious metals being produced and moved around. So sorry I'm late, guys, and just listening in, trying to
Punch,
catch up.
you've been putting in work, man. Boots on the ground. So much love to you for actually doing the work and doing the real stuff out there in the world.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, it's a little loud here, so my apologies.
Jesse, are you saying talking on spaces is not doing real stuff? I mean, we're all doing very real stuff here.
Yeah. This is so worthless.
Hey, Joe, how are you? We lost you for a while.
I'm doing well, Terence. How are you?
Doing good. Our conversations are sort of drifting all over the place. Stables, the Fed.
Yeah, what do you think of the Genius Act? Are you a fan?
I honestly don't know. I would say if this were a few years ago, I would say I was a fan, because I do think it gets us closer to Bitcoin, and a lot of people that might be forced to by their banks start trading in these or start saving in these are one click away from Bitcoin. But I don't. I'm not a fan of more surveillance or potential censorship. So I don't. I just don't know. But I don't
Yeah.
know enough
What
about
do
it.
you think? So I was in a couple different spaces and discussions with people about this, and to me, the really interesting impact of this is how much market share Tether is going to lose, based on the requirements. Obviously, for those unfamiliar, a foreign entity, unless they're submitting to full compliance with U.S. laws or U.S. regulators, Tether is going to not be able to be listed, traded, exchanged in any way in the United States. USDT, to be specific. That's fascinating to me. I
Wait,
don't
wait,
know
Joe.
if there's
Joe, sorry to interrupt, but just for clarity there, have they, do you know, have they said they're going to change,
no,
adapt
they haven't
or?
made a comment yet on it.
Okay.
But currently under the law, you have to be if you're over $10 billion under the act, you have to either be subject to a state regulator or a federal regulator. So, I doubt they're going to subject themselves to the jurisdiction of the United States. I could be wrong in that. That would be a huge game changer if they
So,
did.
Joe,
Um,
Joe, didn't they announce they would have a different? It would not be USDT, but it would be something else.
correct.
They announced it would be.
Yeah,
They would
but
have
that
another.
that basically, yeah, but that takes away their access to the Chinese paper market, which
No,
is,
no, no. It doesn't do
still
anything of the sort. They're going to leave USDT the way it is outside the United States, and have a stable that operates inside the United States.
correct, which means that the USDT can't trade the United States. So pick your poison. What are you going to do? You're going to take USDT out of the entire United States, or are you going to develop an offshoot that is backed only by treasuries and closer to Circle? Which,
Well,
if that's the case, why would I trust Circle rather than a JP Morgan coin, or why would I trust USDT rather than a JP Morgan coin?
well, let's game theory it
You know,
out. Does it matter?
Yeah, I don't think it
yes,
matters. I think,
absolutely, it absolutely matters. Market penetration, dominance, trustworthiness, absolutely matter.
Oh no, no.
To say they don't, I don't.
Okay, okay. Let me rephrase. Does it matter to Bitcoin? The answer to that question, I will emphatically say no. Does it matter to Circle
Well, it
Equity?
matters to the market structure.
Oh yeah,
It matters
absolutely.
to who wins. It matters to who
Yeah, it
wins
matters to
because,
the equity of the
in
companies that are running the stablecoins, 100%. But it doesn't
eh, eh,
matter to Bitcoin.
everybody under the sun is launching a stablecoin. It's like the year of the stablecoin. I tweeted this the other day. That like, in 12 months, we're gonna, just like the Bitcoin ETFs, you're gonna see clear winners and clear losers. And to win that game matters tremendously. To say that, it doesn't matter, we'll have this, Tethers will be a shadow of its former self if you cannot retain majority ownership of this market. And the same goes for Circle, and the same goes for other products. So you want to win. You want to be the IBIT, right? You want to dominate the field. You want to clearly, fire a shot across the bow of competitors. And maybe you'll have two or three major ones with penetration, but you're not going to have 65 stable coins, which are currently what is coming to market in the next year and a half.
yeah, I would just, Dave, correct me if I'm wrong. And then we have Rob, we got Infra, so be really good to hear from you, Rob. But Dave, I think what you're saying is, Tether is, they're in a very strong position. They're in a power position. They're heavily entrenched with the U.S. and the government and the Treasury market and all these different things. And if they can adapt appropriately, that one possible solution is to simply issue another token, right? And say, okay, now we have this token for over here, and we have, for the other countries, and we have our USDT, or sorry, USDT for other countries, and then we have a new token that's compliant with the U.S. market. Now, I don't know if that's going to work, but I think that, Dave, that is that what you're saying? Like they can potentially, essentially, split it, and it's still under the same company, right? So,
Well, I think that Joe makes a valid point, but it depends on what the purpose of the conversation is. If the purpose of the conversation is what does it mean for Bitcoin, I have a very different answer than what does it mean for the equity of Finex Incorporated.
that's what I'm talking about for Tether. Just say it in that context for Tether.
Yeah, just for Tether, they are going to have an interesting needle to thread. Joe makes a great point, which is their dominance in, it's not just China, but their dominance in the global market to be the gateway to crypto, including significantly Bitcoin, is imperiled if they have to apply, if their company, if their coin has to be in the U.S. So the answer is they probably won't do that. But what does mean is some of the volume. Now, most of the volume in Tether is on Binance and OKEx and Bybit, etc. But there is volume on Kraken and Coinbase and whatnot. And Kraken and Coinbase are going to have to probably delist USDT at some point under the Genius Act if that becomes law of the land. I think that's Joe's point, and it will impact its liquidity. Is that a bad thing? Does it matter if it's replaced by USDC or JPM coin or exchanges are indifferent between which coins and just treat them all as dollars, which is what I think will happen. No, it doesn't matter to Bitcoin, but it absolutely matters to Tether. You agree with that, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, greater regulation and market structure, most importantly, that's bullish for Bitcoin. I'm really not really talking about that. I'm talking about picking winners and losers in the space. So I think we're probably talking past one another.
Yeah,
And by the way, I think I think the far more fascinating conversation is picking winners and losers. To me, that's a much more important conversation than number go up for Bitcoin. I mean, I kind of think we all are in agreement about that. So it's better to explore areas where we may have differences of opinion.
yeah. So maybe even though Circle's up like 500% on the week since they came out, maybe that's still a good position to hold, take a large market share once this regulation kicks in. But we got Robert up here. I'm curious what your thoughts are on the whole stablecoin business, what that means for treasury issuance and things like that.
Yeah. Good morning, guys. Personally, I hate stable coins. Personally, I hate the whole the whole topic because what it's doing, it to some degree, it's kind of bailing out the very system that I think most of us agree is pretty toxic. So yeah, to that degree, on a personal level, kind of dislike it, but yeah, no, there's definitely, it opens up, a huge amount of demand for, it basically, creates this kind of multi-trillion dollar money market fund, and I think opens it up to people that are not in traditional money market funds. So, what that does is unlock buying pressure for, trillions in treasury bills. And, this is at a time where you have Trump today, talking about basically doing an Operation Twist, without saying it, taking low end rates lower, and then just issuing all the debt at the short end, and that's these would be bills, and so it would help if you were able to unlock say 2, 3, 4 trillion dollars of demand for short-term debt. If we continue to hold issuance at the current schedule, or even make it even more biased towards the short end of the curve, it kicks the can a bit down the road, I would say. I think that if we do go down that path, I think the yield curve steepens even more notably than it already has. And I've been saying that for a year. So yeah, I think that's probably their most likely option or solution, whatever you want to call it. Continue to hold issuance kind of the way that it's distributed now. Try to kind of enable these further demand channels for short-term debt, and then just shift even more issuance to the short end. And if long-term rates get too out of control, then you would you could theoretically sell debt at the short end and use that to fund purchases of long-term bonds if the long-term yields get too out of control. Now, what that level is, I don't know. Clearly 5% on the 30-year is doesn't seem to be a panic level for them. So I don't know. Maybe that's 6% for the 30-year, but I don't see how mortgages and the housing market would do, under Trump's kind of shadow Fed sort of approach of, just shift it all to the short end, have the stablecoin issuers buy all the bills. Yeah, I don't know how that affects the housing market, but probably not in a positive way.
Joe.
Yeah. So I know Info is probably just using shorthand about comparing it to a money market, but there were several senators who said specifically that the bill was written, John Ossoff, one being one of them, not who voted for, I think, not to compete with money markets, explicitly not to compete with money markets, because that undermines various aspects of the financial system. So I don't think this is a substitute in any way for money markets. It does improve dollar liquidity overall, but I think one of the most important features of the bill is that if you are a U.S. company or a non-U.S. company and you are not primarily engaged in financial activities, meaning you're not a bank or financial institution that's already regulated, you have to get a unanimous vote. If you're going to engage in stablecoin activities, you have to get a unanimous vote of the Stablecoin Review Committee, a new government bureaucracy, and that committee has to decide you as an entity do not pose systemic risks, that you have sufficient safety and soundness practices as an entity. Okay, so like let's just unpack that. If you as an entity, meaning the tiger, Bitfinex, right? iFinex, whatever they're called. If you as an entity want to engage in this activity, want to launch something, you are opening up for review your entire operation globally, your offshore stablecoin activities that are not compliant with U.S. laws. So it's like you're in or you're out. Are you going to participate? Are you going? And this goes back to my conversation with Dave. If you're going to participate, your whole books and records are up for review, and you are subjecting yourself to the U.S. jurisdiction. So if you want to play in U.S. capital markets, you as an entity are going to be subjected to review by a committee in Washington, and we get to decide in Washington whether you pose a threat globally or systemically to the financial system, which is completely, I think, at odds with what the original intention was and what people were talking about with, this is stablecoin, so we're just, we can't be frozen, we can't be reviewed, we can't be AML'd, KYC'd, BSA'd to death. That's completely at odds with what this bill provides.
Yeah, Joe, I think, when you're talking about winners and losers, I think something to keep in mind here is that I think likely what we're going to see is not necessarily a proliferation of a bunch of stable coins, but actually a consolidation. And I think you'll see companies that just can't hack it and then have to either be, acquired or just kind of fizzle out. And then I think you'll see the big players like USDC obviously continuing to establish dominance in the space.
I think it's going to be banks personally, but I could be wrong. Banks
Yeah, I would
banks
say
are going to
banks too.
subsume this space. They're going to say, you children playing around with these quote unquote digital ledgers, the adults are in charge now. Sorry.
Well, that's the clear motive, right, of the Genius Act. You can
Oh
you can
yeah,
just look at it. I mean,
absolutely right.
Rob said it, right? It's a bailout. It's a bailout for the banks, as Rob said, right?
I don't know if it's a bailout for the banks. It's an assertion of bank hegemony.
Yeah, I'm just using that as a term, a preemptive bailout. It's just I'm just using that term sort of lightly.
Yeah, no, I got you. We're tracking. But anyway, any hot takes or predictions for the FOMC? I'm really actually more focused on that right now. I'm very interested in the dot plot. I know Josh is all over that dot plot. He's probably eagerly awaiting it as well.
The SEP. I'm eagerly awaiting the SEP.
Is the dot plot that show 444 on it, Josh? That's what I want to know.
I'm gonna hold my peace.
We got Gary and Matt also up here.
Nobody wants to talk. Okay, dead air. Gary, he's always been, a little shy.
I don't. Oh, there he is. He's up.
There you are, Gary. Sorry, I was having trouble.
What's going on, players? You guys got any juice?
Oh, you're in the bathtub, aren't you, Gary? We can hear the echo.
Oh, it's bad.
It's not bad. You're coming in clear.
I probably need somebody to buy me a microphone. I'm so broke. Is this better?
You spending all your money on
great.
Bitcoin?
555.
Dude, I'm just buying Bitcoin like a banshee. I can't even afford dinner.
That's a true Bitcoiner.
I'm not going to pay Joe for his legal fees. He's going to have to sue me. Can't afford it.
Yeah, were you surprised that we got a chance to buy near 103 yesterday?
I got to tell you, Joe, it's shit surprised the hell out of me. Did you see Ricardo Salinas this morning?
I did not.
Ricardo Salinas, for those that don't know, he's the third richest man in Mexico. He's about 76. 3 weeks ago, his allocation was 80% Bitcoin, and the rest of it was gold and gold mining stocks and some BTC mining stocks. And at the end of the conversation, as he was communicating, the guy's just an awesome human being. He said, I could easily be talked out of my 20% holding in gold and go straight into Bitcoin. This morning, he was on CNBC or something. He literally said, hey, we just bought more Bitcoin. He said, I am not fucking around waiting for, 98. I want on this train at 103, 104, 105. I don't really care. I do not want to miss this. To see these professionals, okay, and then when you really study the emotions in their face when they start talking about it, he talks about Bitcoin in a way like he's really into it, man. Like he's really jacked up about the opportunity. I've never seen this before, Joe. I don't know if you've ever seen this where professionals, 78-year-old guy gets like he looks like a 10-year-old boy with a new toy. It's just it's very validating because I think from this little weird echo chamber we live in, we get all excited. But when you see other well-developed professional people start to have the same kind of characteristics, it's just so, it's just, I don't know, it's so validating.
Yeah.
Not that I know validation, but, these are monster players.
Yeah, it is fun when you get it, particularly some of the bigger TradFi people when they finally get it. It is exciting because they carry a lot of weight and it's annoying to have like the dismissive attitude. Even like when I remember when the president was a year or so ago at the Bitcoin conference. When he was at that point when he said something like, "Oh, have fun playing with your Bitcoins" or whatever. It's annoying, right? Like you want to have somebody treat it with the seriousness that I think we all do, and that's fun to see when it finally develops.
Yeah, it's like the fundamentals, of Bitcoin are actually quite simple. If you just break it down and say, here's the code, here's the network, and so there's only so much you can get excited about and talk about. So when you are like that kid in a candy store, like Gary's referring to, it's like you start operating on the edges of the sandbox, and so that's why we're here every day. It's like what's the news? What's this politician saying? What's that state doing? What's this corporation doing? And for the most part, it's noise. But yeah, we get excited because it's just there's more cheerleaders, I think, for us. David, did you want to chime in?
Hi, Terence. Yeah, I was going to go back to the government and politics. I know some of us have experience. I know Joe's been public. I know there's some public information about Josh's involvement, and I believe Thomas Young. But we see great participation at the federal level in presidential elections. But at like local and state, there's very little engagement. And, at the Bitcoin conference, you had JD Vance speaking in the main hall, inviting dialogue on Bitcoin, not only inviting dialogue, as in, hey, we might make mistakes and we need your feedback. Like, this is not a spectator sport. That applies at the local as well as the state, at every level of government. And a lot of people like to complain, but the statistics say nobody's really engaged. You get engaged in celebrity elections, but at the local and the state level, these politicians would like to hear from you. They would like to hear from all of us. It doesn't matter your political persuasion. The they ask for engagement. And I guess I would just invite people like, let's just not complain. Let's put a little effort forth. That might be an email, that might be a phone call, that might be getting involved in a local group, inviting your state rep to come see you. It could take all sorts of form and fashion that has nothing to do with a protest or putting a sign on your lawn. But collectively in the country, and I would say even here in Spaces, for all that we complain, I wonder how many people are actually engaged and involved. You have JD Vance asking for participation in conversation. Who's doing that?
I choose not to participate. I will not participate in that broken system. My participation is buying Bitcoin. That's the perfect protest for me. So I don't play in their broken system, man. I don't support them. I don't call them. I don't ask them to do anything they're not going to do anyway. So that's my stance. It's nothing but a distraction. My protest is buying Bitcoin, and I find a lot of fulfillment and satisfaction in doing that. No, absolutely not playing or engaging with them in any way. Will never show up to a Bitcoin conference and get on my feet and stand up and cheer for these people who ask me for my opinion. Absolutely not. Makes me sick to my stomach.
Justin,
Fuck them. Fuck the government.
let's not mince your words. Can you just be honest with us how you feel?
Yeah. I feel exactly as Eric Cason does. Let's in no way whitewash these guys or give them the benefit of the doubt.
Well,
Um,
Justin, at the local level, I understand the frustration, but at the local level, I've just made phone calls and had polite conversations, and the next day, issues are solved. Like, I'm not, I understand the angst, but sometimes it's just simple issues that need to be addressed, and sometimes all it takes is a conversation. So I don't know where all this, you know, full force of anti-government comes from. Surely they get some things wrong, but they can do some things for us too that are good.
yeah, engaging in dialogue. How would I do that with JD Vance? That's quite different from what you just said of on the local level dealing with good guys like Thomas. But the federal government, them standing up there and pandering to us, the condescension was withering. And yet you see good, otherwise principled, intelligent Bitcoiners on their feet cheering for these people. Makes me want sick, man. Absolutely disgusting. So you're talking about two different things there. The federal government coming and by the way, you could pay $1 million to David Bailey and have dinner with this guy, which a lot of people said they had no interaction with the vice president whatsoever. So absolutely disgusting to show up in Las Vegas, the most fiat city in the world, and pretend that they're interested in us and that they just want to hear our opinion. Please give us your input. Give me a fucking break. Absolutely not. Not participating. I'm buying Bitcoin. Sorry,
Go ahead,
guys.
Joe.
I think you can sort of take both sides of this, right? Like two people can be right, and I think Thomas is up on the stage, and I would think most of us, I certainly love Thomas. So yeah, it is two different things, I think, Justin, and yeah, as you get up to the go from local to state to federal, the corruption is just gonna increase with that
Yeah, and
that scale.
apologies, David. That is not directed at you. None of that's directed at you, but
No,
don't get me
no,
started,
Justin,
man.
believe me, I understand the frustration. I was just at, like, just as a counterpoint, Bitcoin Policy Institute, they have a summit. I think it's next week. It's like $500 for the ticket. Then you pay like an extra 300. They arrange a meeting with you and state legislators, or it might even be senators. But you go as a group. They're going to put a small group together. You go to their office while you're at this conference. I mean, that's an opportunity. It's a couple $100, but you're pressing flesh with them. You're in their office. They know you have a sizable force. Given who's involved with the Bitcoin Policy Institute. So I don't know. There are constructive avenues.
Let's go to Joe.
Yeah, no,
Yeah. So
go ahead, Thomas.
I was just going to say, a lot of you know I serve at the local level as the mayor of our town. I've been doing it for a long time, like 27 years. Uh, I try to, when you talk about serving people at the local level, it's very different when you move to the state and federal level. The federal level is a complete cesspool, and even the state level is that way as well. But at the local level, I just try to make the town we live in better. Now, I do have access to a lot of the people that I would say most people don't because of my position, and I use it to the best I can to make influences. So, like for example, I'm using my position. I'll be speaking at Trump's Bedminster Golf Course for a breakfast or lunch, and I'm not sure the exact time, but I'll be speaking specifically. They asked me to come speak on Bitcoin. They knew that I was involved with these Bitcoin Today spaces, and I just happen to know a lot of people. And they said, "Hey, will you come and talk to a group of interested people?" So for me, it's just I'm just planting seeds and trying to be a positive influence. I have no illusions that I'm gonna change the cesspool to a swimming pool. It's just not going to be that way. But I do want to make a positive contribution to my community.
If you think
Hey,
about
Jesse, let's go to Joe real quick. He had his hand up, and
sure, yeah.
okay, thanks, man.
Yeah, no, I understand Justin's point about how difficult it is, and I think I agree with the spirit of what he's saying, which is, if you're going to devote all your efforts to federal politics, prepare to be frustrated. But I will just tell you, I've had the complete opposite experience, and far more in line with what Thomas was saying, and David, who made great comments as well. at the local level. I mean, I've gotten zoning ordinances changed. I've gotten roads cleared. I've gotten, school. I helped get a school built. You have tremendous influence at the local level. And I think you should exercise that voice. That's the way the system was designed. It was supposed to be designed where locally your voice would be heard and you'd have responsive politicians. And at the federal level, they're going to be far less responsive. They're going to not really care about 2 or 3 or 10 people. But at the local level, 2 or 3, 10 people can literally move the city council. I've seen it happen in real time and again. And to me, that's worthwhile.
Yeah, so if I could chime in here on this, I think this is an extremely interesting, profound, and important point that we're sort of zeroing in on here, and that's the difference between federal control and local control. And to me, one of the most important innovations of Bitcoin is that it allows for the localization of commerce and therefore trade and government and sort of operations at that local level. And I've talked about this and I've written about this, where Bitcoin can sort of bring us back to tribes, right? The idea of tribes, where you have a small group or a community or a local, operation that can actually work. And if you just think about the general premise of this, what is government? It's a form of control. It's a form of rules, rulemaking, and order. And as you go bigger and bigger, and you get further and further away from a local community, you're just getting to a concentration of power that gets further away from the individual. So to me, Bitcoin is power back to the individual. It's a shift from the corporation or larger institutions back down to the individual level. So my hope is that over time, Bitcoin sort of naturally, and this will take a long time, but can sort of naturally bring the focus back to the local level, which is much better for humanity and much better for social community, in my opinion. So I think this is an extremely important point.
Jake.
Yeah, hey, can you hear me?
No.
I just kind of, Jesse captured a great deal of what I was going to say. I was only going to add that at the federal level and from the fiat matrix perspective in general, it feels like it's not really corruption or that it's broken. It's actually working as intended. And I think that's why, on a more decentralized local scale, everything feels a little bit better. It's a little more like Bitcoin. And so, when it comes to Las Vegas being the most fiat place ever and everyone being super excited about stable coins, I think stable coins, ultimately to go full circle are really just perpetuating the dollar dominance now that the petro is failing, petrodollar, that is. And it's, with the US's main export being dollars across the globe so that we can kind of distribute our inflationary issues across the globe, it just allows for a longer kind of tail of that for the system to work just as it's intended. So I think that's why oftentimes not only is it just bloated and corrupt at the national level and it feels like we can't get much done, but that's because it's working as intended, not because we're going to fix it from the inside of the corpse.
Hey, Jake, it looks like you wrote a book.
Yeah, I did. On kind of on this very this very topic. So pretty much why the thesis is human behavior is downstream from incentives, kind of the Charlie Munger, and then incentives are downstream from the money, which is corrupted and broken by design. Hence why it seems like we're an upside down world clown matrix, which is the fiat matrix. So yeah, I kind of dive into all of those topics along the way.
I'm glad you popped up because I am a voracious reader, have a pretty nice library, and especially collect Bitcoin books. So ordering that right now.
Awesome, dude. I'd love to chat with you about it offline. It'd be a lot of fun.
Sounds great.
Cosmo, I got your DM. I guess Dark or whomever, if you guys want to fire up a new space here, but Cosmo looks like he has to go to a prostate exam. So we can shut it down. Maybe just want to take us around the horn real quick.
Yeah, let's
I'll just
start with you, David.
I guess I would just say I would like to see more cypherpunk ideology spoken about in the space, not at a radical level, but over a 20-year transition. It seems like we get caught up in a lot of republicanism. I mean, I can do that. I can watch that on Fox News. We're all a bunch of visionaries here. I'd like to hear and talk about, how we can reform government to look more cypherpunk, whether that's at a local or a federal or a state level, or it might even transcend all that. What would that look like? Like in an imaginary world, it's not going to happen tomorrow, but give us 20 years. What's that going to look like if we talk about cultural things?
Yeah,
Yeah.
bottom up approach.
And
If Lauren was here, he would say bottoms up. It's his favorite phrase.
yeah, and I think the easiest way to do that is to fix the money first, right? Because there's this massive incentive for corruption brought on by the money printer. So, I mean, step one is fix the money, and then I think we can go on to that quest. But let's go to Kyle. You got any words for us? Welcome to the stage, and also goodbye, I guess.
All right, sounds like you're
He's a
snorkeling.
train. There you went. All right, let's go to Jake. I know you just spoke. You want to any last words for us before we dip out of here?
No, I just thoroughly enjoyed, the conversation and look forward to joining and contributing more often. Thanks to everybody.
Go ahead, Jesse.
Oh, sorry, I was just DMing Dave because
Yeah, don't do that.
love the book stuff. But no, I think this is I would love to talk about that topic that you mentioned. Tribalism and sort of the cypherpunk sort of view. I do think bottom up is the way we do this. And of course, even Satoshi and Hal Finney kind of knew that it was going to get in. If it's going to work, it's going to get into the banking system and the larger governments, and I think that's a good thing for adoption. But that being said, the ethos is definitely more of a libertarian bottom-up approach. So I'd love to talk about that more. Great room today, incredible panel, Terence and Cosmo and Dark and everybody who was managing the room. Great job, and see you guys tomorrow.
Justin.
The whole problem is money, man. Government money is fiat money. We never gave up the right to control the money. The government took that in 1913. They took us off the gold standard. Money was gold back then, and they decided we never gave that up. They just took it. They took that authority upon themselves. So, how amazing right now for $104,000 in the context of everything we've spoken about today, you can buy an entire Bitcoin or a small percentage if you so choose that we can still do that. So fix the money, fix the world. So every day, man, I'm buying Bitcoin.
Justin consistently has the best closing takes of the bunch. Thanks for that, Justin. Go ahead, Thomas.
Yeah, I'm very sympathetic to the cyberpunk, ideology and where it's going to go. Most boomers are not, but I would say where you could get to a nice medium would be what are the conditions societally and within our culture that would allow for that type of cyberpunk culture to emerge as a dominating force. And I do think we have to go through some crisis before that happens. When we talk about fixing the money, I think it has to be more broken than it is today in order for it to be fixed appropriately. I don't think we're going to walk through the next 5 years with incrementalism. I think we're going to be surprised by some of the changes that come. And the cyberpunk culture is probably going to have a more dominating force on the back end of that.
That's great. Go ahead, Dark.
I think he's back on the
Maybe
toilet again. Yeah, we can go to Gary. Gary's
making a
still
sandwich
in the tub. Yeah. Gary, you in your bubble bath? Is Calgon taking you away?
Gary's probably loading a cargo truck up with more of his silver to take down to the pawn shop, swapping into Bitcoin.
he's out selling his suit to go buy Bitcoin. That's what's going on. Well, I'll just I think we had a really, really interesting conversation today. I'd kind of like to dive into the ethics of stable coins more later because I feel like there are a lot of contrasting opinions, that people have and I've had with quite a few people. That would be a fun conversation to expand on. But yeah, this has been super great. Awesome, you guys. Great space. Go ahead, Terence.
Yeah, thanks. Great job today, Cosmo. And it was fun having Josh up here. And I don't know. I think it's the space moves so fast, and every time there's something new, and I'm learning about all these things every time, whether it's bit bonds or stable coins or these Bitcoin treasuries. It just continues to highlight and accentuate the reason and promise and hope of Bitcoin and how it is such a better world. And so not knowing how and when the masses will come over to Bitcoin, I just feel like these are just more touch points. And stable coins, good or bad, I think they're going to proliferate so much that it will awaken people to just digital money in general, which maybe does move them one step closer. So, anyways, thanks for a great space today, guys. I'm sure Dark or someone will fire up one here in 2 minutes. Go take on the day.